Don't all start at once.
I think because we're in a circle like this, maybe you'll have to identify us.
Sure. Gretchen, do you want to say hi? You're on mute.
Probably a good idea to be on mute. I found out about this yesterday, and I just, it was one of those things where I was going to do it. It didn't make any sense to do, but I was going to do it. But I do some other volunteering, so I love nature and very honored to be part of this group, etc.
Thanks for joining us. Claire? We'll practice that unmute button.
I moved to the coast. I'm in Bodega Bay, and I moved here about a year and a half ago. And I just love being on the beach and all the nature around here. And I'd like to contribute and help save everything around here and get another reason to enjoy it more.
Great, thanks for joining us. Carly?
Good morning. My name is Carly Flores Adams, and I heard about this through the Bodega Bay Community Association, and I'm really excited to volunteer.
Thanks for joining us. Carol?
Hi, I've been a tide pool volunteer for a few years, but we weren't having field trips, and I live at Goat Rock, so I started doing seal watch during COVID. And I'll probably keep it up a little bit. I hope we're also going back to tide pools. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. And Carol, not the other Carol, also Carol. You're on mute. Oh. Well, hi, Carol. We can figure that out later. Ruth?
Is that work? Is that work now?
We can hear you now.
Okay. I heard about this from the other Carol because I joined a hiking group, Russian River Jaunts, and she told me about this. And so I've been, visiting the coast a lot and seeing those seals. So I'm interested in this.
Great. Thanks for joining us. Ruth? Can't hear you, Ruth.
This is Ruth Ann. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I had it on speaker. That's probably why. I just used laptop. I've been a volunteer for a few years at whale watching and Armstrong redwoods. And this past week, I had the opportunity to walk Armstrong Redwoods Park. Met so many visitors. It was wonderful sharing and hearing their exclamations over what they saw. And yesterday I went out to the head, didn't see any whales, but the fog rolled in, got real cold, so I left, went down to Duran Beach. Oh my gosh, that was so beautiful. Those are the two I do, but I'm always interested in education and learning and what else I could offer to the visitors.
Thank you.
That's why I signed up for this class.
Yeah, and Ruth was in our office earlier this week. The steward's office is in the back of Armstrong Redwoods, right before the road that goes up to Austin Creek, turning in volunteer paperwork. So if people are new and interested in signing up to volunteer, we're happy to support getting set up and paperwork. And obviously, if you're interested in Seal Watch, today's training is an important part of that.
Will today's class be on seals only, or I thought the description was mammals as well as seals?
It will be on all marine mammals.
Yay! I love the whales. I have a beautiful sculpture on my wall of a big old whale, sperm whale. So I really love them. I think my favorite is beluga.
Thank you, Ruth. Barbara? We'll go ahead with Cars.
Good morning. My name is Cars Flores Adams, and I grew up in Bodega Bay. I moved away and in San Francisco for the past 20 years, but we've been spending a lot of time in Bodega Bay since the pandemic, and we have a community garden up there. So we actually heard about this program. Same as I'm actually Carly's partner, so we heard about it the same avenue.
Thank you for joining us, Taylor.
Thank you.
Maureen?
Hi, I'm Maureen, and I have been spending a lot of time in Bodega Bay for over 30 years. About 7.5 years ago, we bought a home here and we moved in full-time in July. And we have been looking for ways to get involved in a more complete way in the community. And this, we also learned about it through the community center. And we're very pleased to have this opportunity to volunteer.
Thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
And presumably the box above you is your husband, partner? Also Maureen on the screen? You're on mute.
There, yes, I'm Maureen the second. Basically, she said it all. Just a good opportunity to volunteer doing something that's positive, and appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. Diane?
Yes, I'm in Bodega Bay. My name's Diane Hales, and I am here because I have heard more about Sarah Allen than almost anyone else. And wherever I volunteer with the stewards for the tide pools, but as I've been going around and just trying to learn more about the area, people are always saying, well, Sarah Allen says this and Sarah Allen. And so I thought, okay, the mythic Sarah Allen is speaking and I want to hear her. So I'm honored to be able to participate.
Fantastic, thank you, Diane. And our presenters this morning are Greg Armstrong and Sarah Allen. And Greg, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Greg Armstrong and I'm the volunteer point person for Sea Watch. Done this for about 8 years, I think. And yeah, I'll give you a quick presentation later about how we do this and what's the point and you know, how to roll down at the beach. I think we may have some other volunteers joining us later who have done it, and they may share their experience and how they do stuff. So anyway, enjoy it. Sarah is chock full of knowledge, and it's really always amazing. I think this is probably my 5th time I've heard Sarah, and you have me here, so she's that interesting. Okay.
Well, the bar is risen here. Well, I'm the infamous Sarah Allen, and now I'm retired, so I have lots of time to actually visit seals. But I want to thank Justin, and I want to thank the stewards because this is a terrific program. It's really and the volunteers are the backbone of that program and have been from the beginning. So I applaud you for being here and participating. And this is, as far as I know, the longest running stewards conservation program in California, and it's been a model for many others. I've been speaking to the group probably since almost its inception in the 1980s. So I applaud you. I'm glad you're getting recognition that you so well deserve, because you are a model that many people have used in their programs. So I congratulate you for being a member of it now. So I guess I'll just proceed with my presentation, but before I begin, as I said, I give this presentation every year, but I try to update it with new research and new things for you. And remember, I'm only speaking for a couple hours. That seems like a lifetime sometimes, but in reality, it's not very long when you want to learn so much about marine mammals. So I'll tell you, any one of these subjects, you can drill down on the internet and for hours get lost in the amazing things that are being learned about marine mammals now. And that's particularly true because of all the technology. And I'll share my screen now here. The technology has been amazing in our understanding about marine mammals. Here we go. And this is an example of that. This is a drone image. And now research using drones, and I know drones are annoying when you're trying to have a relaxed time on the beach or at sea, but targeted drone research has been really amazing in opening up the world of understanding marine mammals at sea. Because prior to that, we were limited to ships or planes that were pretty high up. But drone really captures things that we would never see before. And this is an example of a humpback whale that has created a bubble net with its blowing bubbles and then lunging through the middle of that bubble net to consume its prey. And this has been captured by planes, but from far up. And here it is with a drone, an amazing image for you to see and for us to learn more about marine mammals. So this is what I'll talk about. I'll first talk about marine ecology and marine mammals, and then I'll talk about pinnipeds generally, and then I'll drill down into the science of harbor seals and what we know around here. Before I proceed, it's hard to interact with you when we're not in person. Zoom limits that. But when we have the break, I'm going to break halfway through. You can put a list of questions there, and I can answer some questions then, and I can answer some questions at the end. So keep that in mind. Put your questions in the chat, and I'll try and address them at different times. Okay, so now we're going to jump into it. So we live in an amazing place globally. We're in an eastern boundary of the Pacific Ocean, and being an eastern boundary section of the ocean, it has an upwelling ecosystem, and there are only really 4 major ones of these in the world, which this map shows. But we're one of the most significant ones. We're the only one for North America as an eastern boundary upwelling ecosystem. And because of that, we have great abundance of species, great diversity, and great abundance. And it's called the California current as it moves along the coast of California, but it comes in at about Vancouver. And there's a unique group of species that are associated with the California current. And it's about 45 marine mammal species. So it's one of the most diverse areas in the world for seeing marine mammals and other species. And these ecosystems along the California current are not uniform. They change with latitude, and they change onshore and offshore. So from north to south, you'll have certain species like this is, and onshore and offshore. So this is a nearshore species of assemblage, which would include gray whales and harbor porpoise and bottlenose dolphins. And you'll have kelp beds where pinnipeds might occur and otters. And then you have an offshore representation of species, and this is the Farallon Islands, located about 25 miles off the Golden Gate. And you have a different assemblage of species. Some are overlapping, but you'll have blue whales more and rhesus dolphins and various species that are found more in deeper waters. And then in the south, you'll find an assemblage of species that's more associated with warmer waters. And we're seeing more of these species occurring now in central and northern California. And that includes common dolphins, fin whales, and sperm whales. We haven't seen the spinner dolphins yet, and maybe not ever, but that's an example of an assemblage in the southern part of the ecosystem. And within these ecosystems, there are habitat features that really attract species, and that includes the bottom types. So if it's a rocky bottom versus a sandy bottom, you're going to have different prey species that they're going to key into. And then if you have kelp beds or eelgrass beds, that attracts species because fish usually occur in those areas as a nursery area. And then there are oceanographic features. These are large currents based on temperature and salinity that occur along the shoreline, and they concentrate prey. And you'll find that seabirds and marine mammals will key into these features, and they're called jets and eddies. And here's an example of an eddy off of Mendocino Cape, and here off of Point Reyes, there's a big eddy, and it entrains the water, and by doing so, it entrains the species associated with that water. And of course, there's unique coastal food webs, and they're very complex, so I can't represent them to you in great detail here, but this schematic, I think, is really captures it well, where you have the top predators such as orcas or whales, and then otters. So marine mammals are an important top predator, but also are prey within this system. And what is most remarkable is the largest animals prey on the smallest, which would be big mouthfuls of krill and small fish. And that itself shows that it's a very tight ecosystem in some areas when you have the largest species dependent on the smallest of prey. But these can be very fragile ecosystems too. And if people don't remember, a few years ago, there was a die-off of sea stars. And this is an example of what's called a pycnopodia, which is a sun star. And when they died off, that was caused a large change in the local ecosystems of the Sonoma coast, resulting in kelp forests being chewed back by sea urchins. And pycnopodia is a big predator of sea urchins. And the pycnopodia died, and the sea stars died off because of a disease. But now I gather there's some recovery, but you can see how fragile these ecosystems can be when you take out one big player. And one of the biggest players that has already been taken out are sea otters in the Sonoma coast. And so that has caused in itself a more fragility in these coastal ecosystems. So where do marine mammals fit into all of this? As I said, they're the most important predator as a top predator. They're also prey. And how did they evolve to be here? And what separates out marine mammals is from other mammals, because they are a mammal, is that their morphology is evolved so that they have specialized body forms. They have funny looking tails that help maneuver them through the water. They have blowholes on the top of their head, which allow them to breathe while they're swimming. And they have weird flippers, such as this with a humpback whale. But is this a marine mammal? Based on what's called the Marine Mammal Protection Act, it is considered a marine mammal because it actually thrives in the marine environment. So polar bears are recognized as marine mammals. So they don't just exist in these marine environments, they actually thrive because they've evolved these special features. They've also evolved special physiological abilities. And as I said in my beginning remarks, you can drill down into any of these subjects and spend days understanding, and yet we still understand just a fraction of how they're physiologically capable to dive for long periods of time. Elephant seals can dive for an hour and a half and then come to the surface, breathe for a few minutes, and then dive again for an hour and a half, and do this continuously while they're at sea. And researchers have just discovered that they actually probably are diving partly anaerobically, which would be unheard of. maybe a few years ago, you would never even think of that. But there's amazing research going on to understand the physiological capabilities of marine mammals because it is so extraordinary. But they have to breathe while they're in the marine environment. They have to keep warm. It's cold out there, so large size matters. If you have a large volume to surface area, you can retain heat better. So that's why you find the largest mammals in the world are in the ocean. They have unique blubber. It's incredibly thick, and it's like a wetsuit. So if they dive, it constricts. It's highly vascularized. And the other interesting thing they have, which all mammals and even birds have, are countercurrent heat exchangers, a complicated term which just means a bundle of capillaries where heat is exchanged between the veins and the arteries, so that the cold temperature from in the veins is not going to the core of the animal and lost. So as the arteries go out, they warm up the veins, and you have this countercurrent heat exchanger. So a whale that takes a mouthful of cold water is not going to lose its core body temperature. There are other places they also have countercurrent heat exchangers, but this is the most significant and most interesting. And you find these extremes in marine mammals for mammals generally. The largest of animals on Earth, blue whales, the oldest bowhead whales have been identified to be older than 200 years. They have the thickest fur of any mammal, sea otters, with 1 million hairs per square inch. That's why they were hunted, for their fur. The longest migration of any mammal. Right now, it's gray whales and humpback whales are thought to be the longest migrators, but it could be blue whales. We just don't have the devices to stay on them long enough to track those movements. And the deepest divers, right now, it's probably sperm whales and beaked whales, greater than 6,000 feet, but we can't measure it because many of the devices are not capable of tracking these animals as they dive deep under that extreme pressure. But here again, they're thriving in these habitats that we can only imagine. And yet we're going to Mars with our devices, our rovers, yet in the deepest seas, we don't understand a lot of what's there. There's been a lot of conservation for marine mammals just because they've been overexploited for various things in the past, for oil, fur, and food. But in more modern times, ship strikes and military sonar are of concern for the conservation of marine mammals. Pollutants have also been of concern, and plastics more recently, but also pathogens, because diseases can be transferred between land-based mammals and marine mammals. So, for example, distemper, which from dogs can also occur in river otters and sea otters and harbor seals. Fisheries interactions have been longstanding, but there have been great strides in reducing those impacts. Not completely, but certainly in US waters, they've been reduced tremendously. But another one that's not looked at as closely is just habitat loss through development of shorelines. And that's what affects pinnipeds, because that's where they need to congregate on shore. Here's an example of a fin whale that was hit by a ship in 2012, and it was coming around Point Reyes and was struck by probably a large container ship, and it broke its back. And this is being addressed by the Coast Guard, first voluntarily, and I think it's been effective in reducing the ship strikes, not completely, but it has helped a lot. And then climate change has a lot of uncertainty about it and its effects. And I'm not going to belabor this subject now, but just be aware that broadly marine mammals are affected. And you can imagine how warm water and harmful algal blooms might change this coastal ecology and affect the prey of marine mammals, and including the effects on krill. But throughout history, there has been a conservation movement to protect marine mammals, and I want to emphasize this. And that conservation ethics first documented in my mind, but probably preceded his in other times. But Captain Scammon, who was Scammon's Lagoon is named after, was a whaler who turned an ardent naturalist and conservationist to protect gray whales in their calving lagoons. And then Mexican government passed the Guadalupe Island protection, creating it as a marine protected area as a pinniped preserve in the 1920s, because so many marine mammals were, pinnipeds in particular, were hunted during their breeding season there. In the United States, the most important legislation is the Marine Mammal Protection Act that was passed in 1972. This had sweeping effects, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I want to emphasize your role. Protection through education is the best way to protect and conserve marine mammals. You're like a stone dropped in water and a ripple effect throughout your communities, and helping people understand why it's important. Why do they want to protect marine mammals? And then just a little more on the Marine Mammal Protection Act. This placed a moratorium on the taking of any marine mammal, and a take is defined as to harass, hunt, capture, or kill, or to attempt to harass, hunt, capture, or kill any marine mammal. So that if somebody runs down the beach and chases the seals in the water, that's actually a violation of the Marine Mammal Protection Act. Not just a killing of an animal, but the defined as the attempt to harass. So very sweeping, in your role is part of that effort to educate people so they understand that. Now I'm going to drill down into the marine mammals that you might see off of Central California while you're out on the coast. And marine mammals don't neatly fit into one taxonomic order. They actually fall into three separate orders. The first is the obvious, the cetaceans, which include the baleen whales, but also the toothed whales. The carnivores, which include the pinnipeds and seals and sea lions, and then the mustelids, which would be the river otters and the sea otters. And then what's absent now are the sirenians. They may have been here, but the stellar sea cow was last documented in the North Pacific in the 18th century. And you can see why they'd be so easily hunted. And they exist in Florida in the United States, but not on the Pacific coast, eastern seaboard here. So first I'll touch on the baleen whales. And the baleen whales, they have baleen knot teeth. And so this is really a unique, evolved foraging strategy. They have symmetrical skulls. And if you look in this picture, you can see they have two blowholes. That's a very important feature that I'll explain further along. And they feed on mostly krill and fish. The females are larger than the males. And that's also unique amongst baleen whales. And they fall into three families in the East Coast. The gray whale is in its own family. The humpback whale is in the same family as blue whales and fin whales and minke whales. And then the North Pacific right whale, which is almost extinct, falls into another family. This is what a blow looks from those two blowholes as an example. And here's that mouth open where they're feeding on baleen. And here's the baleen right here sticking out. Now, I believe this is a fin whale because they're bicolor. I'm not going to talk about fin whales, but just be aware they're off our coast here, but rare. Next, I'll talk about how baleen whales eat. And this simple schematic makes it easy to see. And then I'll show some images, which this will help you understand those images better. They are very sleek when they're swimming through the water, but then they open their mouth, the food is sucked in, the tongue lifts up and pushes the water out, and the prey are entangled in the baleen. So you see that here, they look like a tadpole. How can you swim with a big belly like that? And these are grooves that extend all the way down practically to the belly button. So in essence, a fin whale can consume practically a whole school bus full of water and prey. Amazing. So here is a blue whale, looking at it in that sleek form, and then ballooned out with a mouthful of, in this case, I think it was anchovies, and you can see the side view of this mouthful of anchovies, just extraordinary. And this shows a blue whale, and you can see these images as a video where the blue whale is on its side and it's getting a krill ball consumed, and see how far down that mouth opens up. Really quite extraordinary. Oops. Oh, here we go. Oh, there we go. So only recently have researchers really drilled down to understand better about how baleen whales can actually consume all this water in their mouth, and how they have the capacity to not just open in their mouths, but not break their jaws. And what they found in these two papers are the best that I recommend you look at, is they actually have a sensory organ at the tip of the jaw, and the jaw bones are separated there, and they have extra nerves that are sensitive to the volume that's being consumed. And then they have this extraordinary musculature in the base of their jaw that enables them to consume so much water in a mouthful. So again, I encourage you to look at these papers, and they'll really give in great detail an understanding of how they actually can do this. It's amazing evolution. And again, the blue whale is the largest of all marine mammals. And you look at their back here, there's nothing like them. If you're on the coast or on a ship, and I recommend you go on a ship off of Bodega Bay to see some of these marine mammals, the back just goes on forever. And then there's this ridiculously small dorsal fin. And their back is often mottled like this. Sometimes they're called sulfur bellies because there's kind of a diatom. The diatoms, which are a plant, are clinging to the sides of their body. The calves are 20 feet long. Their baleen is not particularly long. It's about 3 feet, but it's not as long as the right whales, which is about 9 feet long. So they feed on fish and krill, whereas right whales feed on copepods. And so they have a longer baleen to entangle more of those small organisms. The population estimate in the Eastern Pacific for the United States, so that's California, Oregon, Washington, in 2019 was only 1,500. But that's been increasing. Here again is a nice picture of a long back, and here's a common murre for a comparison of size. And this picture was taken off of the Sonoma coast. So they get these population estimates by going to sea on shipboards and then identifying on transects where they see the whales. And then they get a population estimate based on those transects. And you can see their concentrations in certain areas in the Gulf of Southern California Bight, and around Sonoma and Marin counties is a real important concentration area. So your likelihood of seeing blue whales is much higher than other places. And then they also attach some satellite tags, and we're able to track individuals. And you can see that they have a pretty narrow range here, surprisingly so. Some individuals have gone out in the deeper Pacific, but the range is between where they're capping off of Central America and then going up off of Vancouver. So they're really tied to that California current. And they are really more coastal species feeding on krill, which are more abundant along the outer continental shelf. And this shows the population as it's been monitored over the past several decades. And you can see that it is, it's increasing, but not significantly. Now I shift to humpback whales, and they're not as large as fin or sei whales, which are also of this family, but they have this distinctive arching back and very common off of Central California. They have large wing-like flippers, and none of the other whales have these. It's really fascinating. They're called the ballerinas of the sea because these flippers allow them to turn very quickly. And right now they're in competition with gray whales of having the single longest migration. This one animal was tracked from Costa Rica all the way to Antarctica and then back. So 14,000-mile migration. And they're the true singing whales that has been documented for decades. But now with more hydroacoustic studies, other whales have been determined to also be singers, but not as long as singers as the humpback whales. And their songs are really interesting because you can identify different populations from their songs, their variations, but the songs are not the same year to year. They actually change over time. So again, you can drill down just on the acoustics of these animals because it's incredible to understand. In fact, there was an article today in The Guardian about the acoustic songs of fish that are just starting to be understood because they have the equipment to document and separate out. So whales, they understand a little better, but still it's cutting edge science is going on. And this is what a humpback whale looks like when it leaps out of the water, these long pectoral fins. And there are important nodules along the edges of these pectoral fins, and those nodules actually help them to turn quickly. And there's a whole research study by Fish et al. In 2011 that describes this, and that helps them to catch large schools of fish and herd them. Again, unique. And this is another pattern where they're using the flipper. This was a study that just came out a few years ago, where they're using the flipper to herd the fish. So here it is going in a circle, herding the fish, and then lunging through the center because they're concentrating the prey. So this was a study just a few years ago, and more because of drones, you can see this stuff. So the population estimate for humpback whales has also been increasing, and in 2019 it was almost 3,000 whales. Pretty amazing. And this growth has been very distinctive over the past several decades since the passage of the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And NOAA, and as an aside, NOAA is the agency responsible for managing marine mammals, and they have documented that humpback whales have increased, and they're using 3 different models, and those 3 models are pretty much in agreement, except this one year back in 2014. I haven't seen a more recent model where one of the models showed a decline, but generally the population seems to be doing well. And again, they're concentrated in Central California and up here in the Puget Sound area because they feed heavily on herring. And when I say they were covering well, they invaded San Francisco Bay, and I've seen them there myself several times, more than 20 at a time. And this person, Bill Keener, is a researcher. Now he's with the Marine Mammal Center researching cetaceans, and he took this photo from the Golden Gate Bridge. So you can just walk across the Golden Gate Bridge and see a lot of humpback whales. And he took this photo also where they're feeding. So they're feeding on anchovies and herring and other small schooling fish in the mouth of the Golden Gate. And they've been in the Columbia River and elsewhere. And the third most abundant whale that you're going to see in this area, and also has one of the longest migrations, is the gray whale. And this is the whale that we actually know more about than the other whales. It's got the shortest baleen, and it has no dorsal fin. It's also recognized as being a friendly whale because in Scammon Lagoon, even in the 70s, when I was down there, I remember seeing a cow and a calf approaching a ship. So they're curious, they have curiosity, and they're quite friendly. Humpback whales have gotten a little friendly too, now that they're not hunted so much. But an interesting thing about gray whales is they're recognized as ecological engineers. So they calf down in Southern California. About 20% actually is estimated to be calved in the Southern California bight. And then they migrate all the way up to Alaska. Here shows where they have no dorsal fin. And here's the short baleen that you can see. So the reason they're short baleen is because they're considered mud suckers. Here's a cow calf together. Here's the mud sucking. So they're sucking mud off of the bottom and they're eating the organisms that are in the mud. Again, a unique strategy for marine mammals. Humpback whales have also been documented sucking mud, but nothing like gray whales. And they also have these grooves instead of the pleats that you see with the other whales. These are grooves. So they've got a really strong sucking capacity in sucking mud versus opening wide in their throat to consume prey. Really different evolutionary strategy. And you'll see the background here, they're close to shore feeding. And this is feeding off of, I think it's Pacifica. So their migration is really close to shore, really well studied. And if you're interested, go on with the American Cetacean Society, and you can go to the various chapters that exist for monitoring their migration northward. And some of the studies now are showing that they're migrating way up into the Arctic because the ice is melting. So they're actually having more habitat to exploit for foraging than 20 years ago. This graphic shows their migration pattern going north and south. So they begin going south in December, and right now we're at the peak of their migration south, and now some animals are starting to migrate back north, and you'll see this migratory pattern. Females and calves tend to be the last of the migrators, and they lag around in April, May. And that's a good time to see females and calves. They're really close to shore, avoiding orcas, and they're just taking their time because the calves are still pretty small, and they're nursing them as they migrate north. Over the past several years, there have been concern about unusual mortality events with gray whales. There have been a number of strandings, and this graphic, probably you can't read it as well as I'd hoped, but each of these is a different year. And this high one is 1999, where there was a high mortality of animals coming on shore. And you can see by month as they're migrating north, you start seeing that mortality, and mostly juveniles. In the past couple of years, there has been some mortality, but not approaching the levels that occurred in 1999 and 2000. And researchers who study these whales closely have said that the mortality is an example of where the population has been recovering so well that they've overshot their habitat. There's less food to support the population. And here's an example of you're having gray whale calves, and this was off of Bodega Head in 2016, which means that calf was probably born nearby. So you're getting calving happening, not just in the Southern California bight, but extending into Carmel and north of here. Oh, I've lost a slide, so let me go back. I had a population estimate slide, and I guess I've lost it. But I'll just explain that population has been increasing substantially, and the latest population estimate was 25,000. Incredible growth, and researchers believe it's higher now than it was in prehistory. So again, there's a lot of information on that, and when I turn this into a PDF, I'll put that slide back so you have it to look at, to reference. But anyway, now I'm going to shift to toothed whales. So we've talked about the baleen whales. They use baleen for foraging. Toothed whales, completely different, evolved separately from baleen whales, and they have teeth, and their skulls are asymmetrical. They have one blowhole, and they feed on fish, squid, and mammals. They don't feed on krill. And they use their biosonar organ to echolocate. So this is the example of where the schematic, this shows the biosonar organ is housed in the top of the skull. So it's actually an indentation there where this organ sits. And they'll send a signal out by creating a noise from their nasal lips, it's called. They create a sound that bounces out, it detects something, then it bounces back and is picked up by the lower jaw and transmitted to the ear and into the brain, so they can identify what it is and how far it is and where it's located. And this shows some of the research recently done on understanding that asymmetry and that evolution of ability to use biosonar. So they can identify objects depending on the species. So an orca can identify something that's 10 miles away, whereas a bottlenose dolphin can identify a pin at 360 feet. And the reason we know that, because they were in captivity and they could control that understanding of distance and actually did a test to identify it. But that gives you a range of understanding of how powerful that biosonar organ is. And this lower jaw is quite thin and wide, and that is the sensitivity. And this shows the thickness is very shallow here. You can see that based on color, very shallow on the right side. And that's where you see that asymmetry and the pan bone picking up that sound and transmitting it to the ear. So there have been some researchers, and I think that we'll see more of this understanding of using the biosonar organ to stun prey. So they're not just identifying where the prey is and what it is, but they can actually stun prey. And this was early studied and recognized by Ken Norris, who's like the father of marine mammal research and studying dusky dolphins. And using it, he reported being buzzed by them frequently and feeling that buzzing from the biosonar organ. And this is partly understood too, because they're species that have no teeth. So how are they grasping their prey? How are they getting their prey? Beaked whales, for example, can suck in their prey. They have no teeth. So it's more, this is a whole field that will explode with understanding probably in the next decade or two. So the largest of all toothed whales is the sperm whale, and it's been known to dive 690 feet. And the reason they know it that depth is because it got entangled in a cable, underwater cable. But think of the Mariana Trench and how far they might dive within that. Think of the areas where they're exploring that we have never been. So this is a really exciting area of study to understand these deep sea creatures. And they occur offshore here. In fact, calves have been found offshore in Marin and Sonoma County. And they also have these teeth, but they're really not using those teeth for chewing on things. And if you look at a stomach of a sperm whale, which I've looked at several, they're sucking things in. They're not chewing them and digesting them that way. They're sucking them in. And this is one of the things they prey on a lot. It's a warm water species, Humboldt squid, and more Humboldt squid have been seen up here. These are really large squid, as you can see. This is Sophie Webb, my co-author of my book, who's done so many of the drawings. But this is their primary prey that they are thought to find off of our coast. Now I'm going to shift to the medium-sized cetaceans. This would include those beaked whales, Mesoplodon, and you can see there's incredible diversity of species. There are actually something like 14 species identified off of the eastern seaboard. Very rare species, hard to find, but considered one of the deepest divers. Rhesus dolphins, which you might see near shore, but better to see by boat, and they're very abundant offshore here. They've got that big rounded head, that big biosonar organ, as does the orcas, which I'll go a little more into detail here. There are 3 ecotypes of orcas that are identified off of the Eastern California current. And these 3 ecotypes will probably be identified as 3 separate species because they are so morphologically different and what they eat. So the southern resident is the one mostly associated with the San Juan Islands. The transient are the mammal-eating ones that occur up and down the California current. And then there's this little known group called the offshore orcas, which feed on sharks and rays and are further offshore, seen around the Farallon Islands and places like that. And their prey items are very different. So for the San Juan Islands, also called the bigs or southern resident, they feed mostly on salmon. And they like Chinook salmon in particular, but they've been seen all the way down in Monterey Bay, but they're always feeding on fish. Wherever they've been documented, they've been feeding on fish. And that they've determined from their poop and also observing what they've eaten. The transients feed mostly on mammals, and it's all different sorts of mammals, marine mammals. So they are feeding on porpoises and whales, and gray whales are their big source of food now. And then the offshore feed on sharks. And this is a picture of one attacking a shark on the Farallon Islands, first documented in the 1990s. So the sharks all disappeared after that. Now I'm going to shift to the medium to small cetaceans. And these are the ones that you might see near shore, but again, get on that boat out to Bodega Bay, out of Bodega Bay, out to Cordell Bank and the Farallon Islands. These are ones that love to bow ride, and you'll see out there, particularly the Pacific white-sided dolphin, which is only found in the California current. Then there's this northern white whale dolphin, which has no dorsal fin. It's a beautiful, amazing species that you can see, and they often bow ride, and you'll see mixed species herds that will be bow riding. Those are the dolphins, and they have a beak. Sometimes the beak is very long, sometimes it's short, but they have a very distinctive beak, and they have conical teeth.
Oh, so she took it.
Porpoises have a rounded head, and they have spade teeth. So you're not going to see those teeth unless you see a skull on the beach, but they have spade teeth like a shovel. And there's the harbor porpoise, which are found all along the coast near shore, and they feed on schooling fish. And then the Dall's porpoise, which is offshore, and this is one of the fastest swimmers. They can swim up to 35 miles an hour. Incredible. So when they bow ride, they'll bow ride and then they'll take off. And you'll see them go into the distance because they're so fast. The bottlenose dolphin, you're seeing more frequently now along our coast, and their range originally was off of Mexico and Southern California. And the population estimate is about 450, but their range is extending, and they're being seen regularly off of Mendocino County. And here's documentation that was collected in 2015 off of Bodega Head. So the ones in San Francisco Bay were documented by Jackie Soames and compared with the records for San Francisco Bay. So these are regular occurrences now off of Sonoma coast. And then the harbor porpoise, which is studied very closely in San Francisco Bay and are quite abundant. They don't bow ride, they're near shore. They have this teeny dorsal fin and very hard to see. But if you walk across the Golden Gate Bridge, I guarantee you'll probably see them because they're so abundant in that area. It's been documented by this group, which is now part of the Marine Mammal Center. Bill Keener is the lead on that. It's really exciting to see this recovery of a species that was really depressed for various reasons, mostly because of a gillnet fishery, World War II gill nets that were submarine nets, excuse me, that were across the Golden Gate, entangled a lot of them. So their population was heavily depressed, but has been recovering in the past couple of decades. And then the last group of marine mammals that I'm going to talk about before the break are sea otters, which were abundant here. I've been reading recently about their abundance in the 1700s and early 1800s before they were hunted out by fur traders, and for a reason, that incredibly thick fur. This is the smallest of the marine mammals. It's almost entirely pelagic. They raise their pup in the water. They do come on shore. In fact, a pup was born on shore in front of the Monterey Bay Aquarium several years ago, to everybody's delight. But they pup singly, so that's one of the reasons why only a single pup. It's one of the reasons why they have low productivity, and that's added to the depression of their recovery. They eat mostly shellfish, but they'll eat birds and some other things. And this is their range now. This is a subspecies of separate from the subspecies in Alaska, and they have been seen in Tomales Bay and in Drake's Estero recently, but the Fish and Wildlife Service is actually thinking of translocating some into San Francisco Bay, and they did a study looking at the habitat as potential habitat for sea otters, and this red areas are considered high quality habitat. Here in Richardson Bay seems a little polluted to me, but they think that that has potential good habitat, and here's San Pablo Bay. So there are areas where there's potentially good habitat for sea otters, and maybe we'll see them more along the Sonoma coast. They're individually you see them, and usually those are males, not females. So this is another study you can look at to drill down and understand more about that. So now what I'll do, I'm take a break for 5 minutes. So go up, go to the bathroom, get a glass of water, whatever, 5 minutes, come back and we'll talk, and if there's some questions, I'll try and answer a few of those when you come back. How's that, Justin?
Beautiful. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay. So you can put your questions in too.
Hello, Mary.
Okay. Tell me, Justin, when I should begin.
You're all set, Sarah.
Okay. Well, I've got one question here about drones and how low small planes and is there a rule about how low small planes and non-emergency helicopters can fly over protected areas? This is a whole subject that the FAA has control over, and there's a lot of conversation that's going on because drones are a game changer as far as aerial disturbance of not just terrestrial, but not just marine, but terrestrial. And it's used in emergencies a lot, especially for fires. And then TV crews use drones frequently to document things. So it's a field that's kind of like the Wild West right now until they get a hold of regulating. I was part of a committee that was looking at it with the Marine Sanctuary because they were trying to have regulations. And the FAA was really not willing to put in regulations about the use of drones by the public. And so you can go into Best Buy and buy any sort of drone you want. It's wide open territory right now, but I'm sure that over the next few years, there'll be some regulations. It's illegal to fly drones over a national park, for example. And even with research, it's limited. So this is a field you'll hear more about. And I do think there's a benefit where you can use it, but it's also, there's got to be more regulation. So I hope that answers your question. During the break, I went and hunted down that slide on the gray whales because I was so bothered that it disappeared, and I wanted to have this population estimate so you understand that this is a really high figure. When you look at the other numbers of cetaceans that I showed you, yes, we study gray whales more intensively than those other whales, but even still, it's an amazing recovery of this species. It's less at risk to certain exposures than the others. But you can see that growth has been really tremendous. And this estimate of in 2018, I think it's down because of the unusual mortality event, but still, when I talked to Sue Moore, who's the researcher who probably knows more about gray whales than anybody else, she said with the sea ice disappearing in the Arctic, they have more habitat. And so that's going to provide an opportunity perhaps for the population to continue to grow. There have been sightings of individual gray whales in the Atlantic. So they're getting across the Arctic into the Atlantic Ocean, and that might continue. So things change. And so it's an interesting time to see these changes. So now I'm going to shift over to pinnipeds and then drill down into harbor seals specifically. This picture is from the Channel Islands, San Miguel Island specifically, which is part of the Channel Islands National Park. And on that island, there are 6 species of pinnipeds. It's the highest concentration of any pinnipeds in the lower 48. And most remarkable, Starker Leopold, who was Aldo Leopold's son, said it's the closest thing to the Serengeti in the United States. Just masses of marine mammals and all species. And quite amazing to see. You can actually camp on San Miguel Island and get out there by boat. It's an experience I encourage you if you have that adventuresome nature. So pinnipeds are a carnivore, so they're just like dogs and cats in the same order, but they at one time they were considered a suborder, Pinnipedia, which pinniped means wing-footed. But recently, I think that suborder has been dissolved and they're just under carnivores generally. All pinnipeds give birth on land. That amount of time they spend on land after they give birth varies tremendously from just a couple days to 2 weeks. So, but they all give birth on land. There's a lot of variation in the morphology. There are long flippers, there are roundheads, there's fur versus not so fur, big thick blubber, not so thick blubber, big noses and chest shields. And all of these are examples of what I spoke about earlier in the evolution of marine mammals. And they also vary a lot in their need to molt on land. So their tie to the land varies a lot. For elephant seals, they have to molt on land. So they come on shore to give birth and to molt, and the rest of their life, they're at sea. So they spend about 80 to 90% of their life at sea. That's the most pelagic of the pinnipeds. Some of the others spend a lot more time on shore, and harbor seals haul out almost daily. So give you an idea of the incredible range of diversity in pinnipeds. But because of that need to haul out and give birth on land or to rest on land, there are few places where they can do so. So the Channel Islands is an example. This is Ana Nuevo, and you'll get multiple species at some of these sites where they come and rest on shore. So that at Ana Nuevo, you've got elephant seals and California sea lions and stellar sea lions and a few harbor seals. Now, pinnipeds fall into 2 families, and the one is called the Otariids, which are the sea lions and fur seals, and the other are the Phocids, which are the harbor seals and elephant seals. And the difference in their morphology is that Otariids can rotate their pelvis, so they can walk on all fours. They can actually gallop on land. So they can rotate their pelvis, and they use their front flippers for moving through the water. So their pelvic oscillation is what it's called, for moving through the water. And seals use their rear flippers for propelling through the water. They've got very powerful rear flippers, and they rotate their flippers back and forth in a sculling motion. They can't rotate their pelvis. In addition, the fur seals and sea lions have a little external ear pinna like we do here, whereas seals do not. And I'll go into more detail with this. You just look at how they are in the water and on the land, you can see how their morphology affects the sorts of habitats they can use. So the Otariids, here they are like a wing-footed mammal swimming through the water. It also limits how deep they dive, though. They are not deep divers, whereas these Faucet seals have a larger rear flipper. They can dive quite deep. Even a harbor seal can dive 1,000 feet. But because they cannot rotate their pelvis, they crawl inshore fashion along the shore. So they have to use a low profile habitat on their terrestrial grounds where they gather, whereas fur seals and sea lions can crawl up quite high on rocky areas. So there's a real difference. Even though you can see them together on a beach, you can also see a separation of species in different habitats. In our area, there are 3 major concentrations where you'll have multi-species. There is Ana Nuevo, the Farallons, and Point Reyes headlands, where you will see multiple species. And this is Point Reyes headlands, where there's a large colony of elephant seals, and California sea lions will gather there too. But where's this? This is San Francisco Bay, Pier 39. Hard to believe, but this is actually a concentration area for California sea lions. And I actually see some harbor seals that haul out there too. So it's not all natural habitat. They can leap up onto these floats, which were specially created for them, and use those when they are using San Francisco Bay for hunting of salmon and herring during the winter months. And it is used mostly during the winter months. They all also, because they're exposed on land, they have terrestrial predators such as coyotes and polar bears, besides their marine predators, which would be, this is an orca actually preying on a harbor seal in Vancouver Island. Incredible documentation of that to see. And then of course, white sharks. This is a white shark picture taken off of Point Reyes headlands. They're the major predator of pinnipeds in our area, but not the only one. Increasingly, coyotes are becoming a predator here. But what was a predator? Well, grizzly bears were obviously an important predator prehistorically before they were hunted out. They were probably the most important terrestrial predator, and it would have pushed these animals into areas that they couldn't use, that they're using today, such as elephant seals using the beaches at Point Reyes. They wouldn't have been able to use those beaches because these predators would have been present, and they would have been pushed more to islands such as the Channel Islands and Ana Nuevo for raising their pups and giving birth. Now I'll go down into each family. Sea lions and fur seals, the Otariids, again, external ear flap. You can see its little coloration here for the California sea lion, and here a little more pronounced. This is a fur seal. They're very strongly sexually dimorphic, so the males are much larger than the females. And I'm not going to talk about fur seals just because of time, but just note that they're present here and they breed on the Farallon Islands, and you might see more of them in Sonoma County. Now here are the 4 species, Guadalupe fur seal and northern fur seal. Guadalupe fur seal actually breed down on Guadalupe Island and some of the other islands, but their range is expanding and they're showing up now on the Channel Islands and breeding on the Channel Islands. So this is an example of a recovery because they're not hunted for their fur, and that's what they were hunted for. And the northern fur seals are breeding on the Farallons and have been since the 1990s. And I think last year there were several hundred pups born. So you're going to increasingly see them on shore in our areas. But the 2 that we'll see most frequently, and you'll see in Sonoma County more frequently, are the California and Stellar sea lions. So I'll talk a little more about them. The California sea lions are the most gregarious and they're the loudest. They're the ones that are barking. They even bark underwater. A friend of mine who had a hydrophone, who put it underwater, was on a ship and there was no sound at all on the top of the ship. But when she put the hydrophone under the water, the sea lions were barking away underwater. So they're very, very vocal and they're very gregarious. They breed May through June, so you might still be seeing some up here, but they're going to make a great exit down to the Channel Islands where they breed, and to Ana Nueva where they breed. They also breed a little bit on the Farallons, but not that much. But their population's increasing, so you're increasingly seeing their numbers up in Central California. Again, they're very sexually dimorphic. The male is much larger than the female, as you can see here. And here's their range all throughout the California current and where they're breeding. And here more locally. So you can see this incredible population increase. They're almost 300,000 now, and it's still growing at about 5% per year. And this was an estimate done within the last decade. So they occur here, but they're not breeding. They do breed on the Farallon Islands in small numbers. And this is what a colony on the Channel Islands looks like. We have a male holding his territory, and then the females strewn out around there, and then the pups. And the female goes to sea and forages and then comes back and nurses the pup. So in some years, you'll see that the female can't find the food she needs down in Southern California. These are El Nino years, and these pups are abandoned. And those are years when you'll start, because she can't nurse them anymore, those are years when you'll start seeing young California sea lions showing up on beaches in Central California because there's no food down in Southern California. The stellar sea lion is the other species that occurs around here. They do breed up around here. They breed at just near Fort Ross. So you can go out to your coast there with a pair of binoculars or a spotting scope, and you can see males and females with pups on those rocks just north of Fort Ross. They're mostly non-migratory. They will move around, but they'll stick to a region. So for example, Point Reyes Headlands, we don't have a breeding colony, but I often see changes in numbers. And suddenly we had 24 new stellar sea lions. So I called up my friend at Onanuevo and I said, we've got 24 suddenly up here. And she said, yeah, we lost 24. So that there is that shift around, but they don't migrate very far. They do calf on the Farallones, and as I said, in Sonoma County and Onanuevo, and they're present year round. They also breed during May and June, but you don't see this mass exodus as you do with the California sea lions. They are the largest of all of these pinniped otariids, and the males are up to 1,500 pounds. So you see this big mane, and that's where the term sea lion came from, because they roar. And they have this large mane. They're not barkers like the California sea lions. The females are the same size as the California sea lions, so you can see how much larger they are. And here they're breeding colonies going north. So their range is shrinking, and that's partly related to climate, because they tend to feed more on or occur in more temperate waters, and they feed more on temperate species like salmonids. So salmon species are hurting in California, and so there's less food for stellar sea lions, and their range is definitely shrinking because of that. And this shows a general decline, and I'm not sure you can see this in the numbers, but their population has declined significantly in California over the past several decades. In Oregon and Washington, the numbers are about the same. And so recently they were delisted as threatened because their population was stable in Oregon and Washington, but they're only 2,700 in California. So the range is shrinking. Okay. So here is an example of a stellar sea lion colony. And they used to breed again on the Channel Islands, but their range has been shrinking. And you can see this massive chest and neck of the males with the females, and the pups are dark black when they're young. So you can see this females dispersed amongst them. Here's a California sea lion population right nearby. So you have the stellars in California, and again, they can climb up in the rocks, which makes it pretty interesting. So that's it for the otariids. And now I'll talk about the Faucet seals, the northern elephant seals and the harbor seals, the smallest and the largest of all pinnipeds. So again, no external ear flap. You don't see an ear flap here or there. no articulated hips and short front flippers. And you can see there's a size difference with male northern elephant seals, very strong sexual dimorphism, but not with harbor seals. And I'll go into that in a bit. So here is where that ear opening is, very small in elephant seals, very small. And the whiskers are also very important for faucet seals. They tend to be beaded, and they can discriminate between objects moving, because they're at the base of each of these whiskers, there is a bundle of nerve endings. And again, this is new cutting edge research where they've determined that these whiskers are incredibly important for elephant seals and harbor seals in detecting prey, and maybe for otariid seals too, but the studies have been with the faucet seals. And you see they have these eyebrows and these whiskers on the side, and these are quite important for detecting prey. So for elephant seals, being the largest, they also are long migrators. So they can migrate. As a pinniped, they're the longest migrators. So they migrate within 1 year 2 times up to Alaska or into the deep ocean to forage. As I said before, and reiterate, they spend most of their life at sea, and not only at sea, but underwater. They're deep divers, and they can dive deeper than 5,000 feet. And the reason we know that it's deeper than 5,000 feet is because the sensor was imploded because of the pressures of depth. So deepest divers, and when they're diving, they're swimming. So they're not just diving passively, they're actually swimming at depth, chasing prey. And they eat bottom fish and some pelagic squid, but we know very little about what they actually eat, just starting to understand that. When they come on shore during the breeding season, they can fast up to 3 months for a male. So they're losing, and a female for 1 month, because she spends just 30 days with her pup. So when they're on shore, during the breeding season, they're losing 1/3 of their body weight. So they've got to bulk up fast. And so they go to a place to forage where they have very greasy, high caloric content fish. And usually it's something you would never find on your plate, like rat-tail fish, sablefish, skates and rays, and hagfish, and things like that. They breed not in the summertime, but in the wintertime. So now's the time. It's peak breeding season right now. And if you went to Point Reyes, you would see a lot of mating going on and females with pups. It's a great time of year. And it's one of the few places on shore where you can actually see them. They also breed on the Farallon Islands and at Ana Nuevo for a long time. But there's a new colony now up on the Lost Coast in Mendocino County, and it's a really fast growing colony. So if you were a hiker, that would be a place to go and to see them. So they forage way offshore in deep water, as I said before. And this shows the extreme sexual dimorphism. So the male can be up to 5,000 pounds and the female 1,000 pounds. And here is a pup that's almost going to be weaned. They're born at 70 pounds, and when they're weaned, they're 300 pounds. So you can see this incredible size discrepancy. It's like a different species, and they indeed feed in different areas and likely on different things. I want to make sure that you not get confused with a yearling elephant seal is the same size as a harbor seal. And in these 3 pictures, they look color-wise the same, but they are different species. And you may find those yearling elephant seals on the beaches here, and sometimes they haul out with harbor seals. So just be aware, you might find a young elephant seal amongst your harbor seals. Since I can't ask you which it is, since we're on Zoom, I'll tell you, this is the harbor seal. And if you look at the difference, the eye size, enormous eyes, they're diving deep, much smaller eyes. Unfortunately, you can't rely on coloration, but harbor seals tend to be spotted, but with pre-molt, they look pretty shabby, just like yearling elephant seals. The real kicker is if you walk up to an elephant seal, it's going to do this at you. It's going to roar at you, and it's not going to run away. A harbor seal won't let you get within 10 to 20 feet of it because they're really scared of people. Elephant seals, not so much. So that's usually the best way to tell if it's an elephant seal. And if you get really close too, you'll see that elephant seals have no nails in their rear flippers, whereas harbor seals do. There's a difference. And this is what an elephant seal colony looks like at Point Reyes, looking down, and here are the males aligned along the outer part of the herd, and this is mostly females with pups interspersed with a large male, alpha male in between. So they have a dominance hierarchical breeding system, just like the Otteriid seal. So you have dominant breeding males and number of a polygynous mating system. And their population recovery has been extraordinary. They're also about, I think the estimate was 179 in 2010. Well, now it's almost 300,000. So they've had an incredible recovery. And in Central California here, the fastest growing colony is the one at San Simeon. And I think last year there was more than 14,000. I can't remember the number, but it was really extraordinary. In the Channel Islands, there were 38,000 pups born. So it gives you an idea of how large the populations south of us are, but we're growing colonies, and there's a new one in British Columbia on Race Island. So this is a species that doesn't have a terrestrial predator per se. There are no bears around here. And their marine predator, white sharks, are present and certainly feed on them, but are not taking enough to depress that population recovery. One thing that we might see over the next decade are orcas, mammal-eating orcas feeding on elephant seals, because they've already been investigating the area down in San Simeon, close to where they're killing other marine mammals. So it wouldn't be surprising if they started eating elephant seals. And this shows the population recovery at Point Reyes when it first got established in 1980-81, and this last season, there were something like 1,580 pups born. So really amazing recovery. Not every year is a good year though. And elephant seal pups cannot swim at birth. So just like the Otteriids, they're not left on the beach. The female stays with them, but they can't swim at birth. And so if you have in winter months, you have big storm events, and especially during El Nino years, you see higher mortality. This is percent mortality, this is year, and these are El Nino years. This year, in 1995, was just a wet year, and if you live near Rio Nido, you'll remember those big rains that occurred that year and a lot of landslides. That was a very wet year, and it caused a lot of mortality for elephant seal pups too. But mostly mortality is around 20% of pups per year. And this is what happens. So the pups drown when you get this elevated sea level associated with El Nino and big storm waves. In the past 2 years, no storms in the winter. Elephant seals are doing great. And when they are doing great, they're spreading. So here's an example of a new colony that occurred several years ago. This is where the main colony was established, then it spread out. Here, this beach during big storms gets washed out, but this year there was not a big storm, and it was produced probably 60 pups. And also they're using the beaches in front of the visitor center. Here's the visitor center. Here's 70 females with pups in 2019. When the government shut down, it meant no rangers and nobody on the beaches. Drake's Beach was overrun by elephant seals. Usually it's overrun with people. So what we're having is a potential conflict between people and elephant seals in the future. And so the Park Service has decided to keep the elephant seals away from in front of the visitor center. And in the past 3 years, they've hazed females off of the beach that were pregnant and allowed just males to be hanging out there. And they've been fairly successful in no females birthing right here. There's just too many conflicts between people. People aren't very smart around elephant seals. They can get very close and bother them. So in this circumstance, you would still have a lot of people here, but all the elephant seals are all along the beach along here. And that happens in May when they come back to molt and that. So the public's enjoying themselves, the elephant seals are enjoying themselves, at least for the past few years. So that's it for elephant seals. Now I'm going to drill down into the harbor seals, which is what you're most interested in because you're going to be helping in the stewards program. And I'm going to drill down quite a bit into this. And if you don't recognize, this is your favorite place. And I love going to that overlook of the Russian River, looking down at the elephant seals down there. Jamie Hall is a wonderful photographer who always shares his images with me. But I've been just astounded to watch this colony over the past 40 years and its tenacity in using that site, which gets so much public focus and so much management focus of the Russian River. And they're still hanging in there. And it's a wonderful place for people who cannot hike anywhere to see harbor seals and an amazing vantage point. And I've been at the mouth of the Russian River watching gray whales and harbor seals and brown pelicans diving. It's really quite an extraordinary place that you have in the heart of Sonoma County. So with that, harbor seals are found throughout the northern latitudes of the world, but you can't see them in those other places like you can see them at the mouth of the Russian River. There are very few places where you can see them like that. So it's an exceptional place that you can share with the public so they can understand the uniqueness of what their opportunities are. So they're a temperate species. They're found again in the northern latitudes. The southern range is in Baja, and that's pretty warm, but they're a small seal. And they can offload heat in various ways with their rear flippers. They can haul out year round, and they're a year-round resident in all of these sites. There's migration, there's movement, but you also have those individuals that stay in a spot and don't migrate. And they tend to use these spots almost every day. Even in the winter months, you're going to see them hauled out within a week, most of the days of the week, depending on tide and weather. Their breeding season, just like the Otterides, is also in the spring, summer. And I want to emphasize that we have a high concentration of harbor seals in Central California. It's a really important area for the state. If you think of Southern California, there are no areas really with concentrations of harbor seals south of Point Conception. There's a little group at Carpinteria. There's the one that everybody knows at Children's Pool. But most of the harbor seals in Southern California occur on the Channel Islands, which is a large concentration. But on shore, people don't see them in Southern California. So this is important area, and your ability to protect them and have people still enjoy them is very important. And they also, as the others, eat on mostly small schooling fish. And what I'd said earlier, little sexual dimorphism. So the males and the females are about the same size. They have unusual teeth with these cusps. Now, the elephant seal teeth are very standard, like most carnivores, but you'll see the scalloping in harbor seal teeth. And when they're capturing prey, they really can't hold on to it. So remember the sperm whale with their teeth, very conical, plain, simple teeth, not really for seizing, and that's very different with harbor seals. And this is the study if you want to learn more about their teeth. And again, they're a carnivore. And they also come in all different colors and phases of colors, and the spot patterns vary from what's called a common spot pattern, which is black, mostly on the back and a light belly. And many marine mammals have this contrasting light belly, dark back. And the reason for that is so if you're a fish and you're looking up, you're not going to see a light belly, a predator such as a harbor seal. But if you're a harbor seal, you don't want something to see you from above, so you've got a dark back. You your form disappears in your environment. And then hauling out on these rocky intertidal areas, this mottled coloration makes them blend in well with either sandy beach or rocky. And then, oops, there's a red one. What's that? So red ones, that's iron oxide, and it's pretty rare actually along the outer coast, but in San Francisco Bay, about 40% of the seals are red. And this was based on a study I did way back in the 90s, but it's persisted. And when you look at the number of red seals in San Francisco Bay, it's much higher than any place else in the world. The red seals all throughout the world, in Japan and England, in the Netherlands, but very small percentage, less than 5%, but 40% in San Francisco Bay, and it's iron oxide and it's attached to the fur. So and it's still an area to be studied in more detail, but it depends on their genetics and where they're foraging and how they're foraging that it's affecting them. But you'll see these intensely red seals. So this is, again, is iron oxide and it's attaching to the hair shaft. You'll also see green seals. What's with that? And that's algae growing on them. And there was a recent study that we just participated in with Floyd Hayes, who took these photographs of harbor seals. And this is in Bodega Harbor. This is at Bodega Head, in that little colony at Bodega Marine Lab. And he saw this incredibly leafy ulva, it's mostly ulva, sea lettuce growing on their backs. And so he said, what's with that? And we pulled our data and looked at it, and over the past 20 something years, and we noted that they're mostly associated with seals in estuaries. They're mostly adult females. And of animals that we had tagged, clearly something like 40% had algae in these estuaries. So it's a pretty interesting phenomenon. It's not to the benefit of the seal because it's kind of drags down on their hydrodynamic shape, but it's a great platform for algae to grow when a pregnant female is floating in the water as she's pregnant and spending a lot of time in the water before she gives birth. So that's my theory. And maybe we can study them some more and find out why there's so many seals with algae in estuaries. Very few males. Now shifting to these habitat needs of seals. This is not just for pinnipeds, but I want to emphasize for harbor seals, they have to haul out to give birth on land. They also nurse on land, but they can swim at birth. So harbor seal pups are different from the other pinnipeds in that they can swim at birth. So they can use these transitional habitats, such as sandbars that are exposed at low tide or offshore rocks exposed at low tide. But because they're such a small seal, they often have to haul out almost daily. So there are a lot of things that are driving them to use terrestrial sites more frequently than the other species. And they have an historical attachment to sites. So some of the sites that have been studied of harbor seals have been used 1,000 years. There's one site in Japan that's been documented where seals were hauled out for more than 1,000 years. And I would suggest that the Russian River mouth has probably been used more than 1,000 years, more than probably 1,000 years, several thousand years. So these are got historical significance. So you have a culture associated with seals hauling out there and resting there. And I just emphasize this terrestrial connection, so important to harbor seals, different than the other pinnipeds. And then of course they make their living, they find food, and they travel in the marine environment. And these shows the diversity of habitats. These are tidal sandbars in Drake's Estero hauling out. Here's the mouth of the Russian River and sandy beaches. This is tidal mud flats in San Francisco Bay. A friend of mine, Jim Lewis Irvin, sent me these pictures, and look at how mud encrusted these harbor seals are. They're just rolling in it. It's kind of amazing. And then offshore rocky habitats, so very diverse compared to the other pinnipeds too. Very diverse habitats. And here are the many more places where they haul out because of that diversity. And you can see within the bay, and actually there are more areas up here they haul out, and along the coast all the way up. There are many more than these dots are showing, because these dots are just showing areas where more than 100 haul out. And here again is an example of a tidal sandbar, the Drake's Estero, which is one of the largest sites in the state of California. And here shows an overview of Drake's Estero and why it's so significant as a haul out site in the state. They use all of these tidal sandbars to haul out on, and that's a way to avoid predators and people. So the park has restricted access to Drake's Estero to kayaks during the harbor seal pupping season, so they get a higher level of protection because of that. And here's an example of, this is about 150 seals just using one sandbar. Here's another group here using another sandbar, and it's strewn throughout. So altogether, there were about 400 pups born in this one estuary. They also use sandy beaches, and this is down in Monterey Bay. And this is a beach called Double Point that's in Marin County, just north of Bolinas. And here are rocky areas. This is where you see all those red seals. This is Castro Rocks as an example. They look like they're boneless on these rocks. Really kind of amazing, but they haul out on the rocks during low tides. And here's some other rocks, some of which I think you'll probably recognize because they're near where you live along the Sonoma coast. And in fact, here's a red one there. Surprise, surprise. And of course, your favorite one near home. And they use both sides of this amazing estuary. But they'll also use human structures, and that's what's surprising. And they'll use human structures, particularly in bays. This is San Francisco Bay, and this is in this is Tamales Bay. This structure was actually designed for harbor seals, specifically in Alameda County. And my colleague Jim Harvey helped design it. And it was made because a structure where harbor seals were hauling out was going to be dismantled in Alameda area. And the seals shifted over to this, another favored place. But you see that low slope where they could haul out. So this is a created habitat just for harbor seals. Really, it's groundbreaking to show that you can create habitat for pinnipeds. Though harbor seals, we know a lot more about their daily cycles and seasonal cycles than the other pinnipeds because they do haul out daily almost. And I'm going to talk in more detail about that. So their daily cycle is influenced by time of day and the tide cycles. And their seasonal cycle falls into these three categories. So I'll go into each of these. And the daily cycle is strongly influenced by daytime. So you're going to see more seals haul out when the solar radiation is highest and least during the night time. That implies that they're foraging more at night than during the day. And it may be that more prey are available at night because that deep scattering layer comes to the surface more at night. But it also may be that solar radiation is really important for them during the daylight hours. So this is a strong, if tide is not an issue for them, they'll be strongly diurnal in their haul out patterns. The tide, though, really drives their access to sites on shore. And so if it's a minus tide, they have maximum access, and then it drops suddenly off after this site happens to be in Bolinas Lagoon. And so after a 1.5 to 2 tide, the numbers really fall off. They'll hang in there as long as they can. This seal's belly is on the sandbar, and they're keeping warm with their flippers up in the air. They lose and gain heat through those rear flippers. It's important. So this site is interesting because they use it both at high tide and low tide. So this is in your neighborhood. And Jamie Hall brought this to my attention. So you can't see the seals so well in this photograph, but be aware that they're interspersed throughout these little tide pools. And in fact, seals like to have their pups in these tide pools. They don't get overheated. They don't get into trouble. It's like a little nursery area. Now I'm going to go into the seasonal cycle that's layered on top of this daily cycle. So in the winter months, That's when they spend more time foraging, and there's also less availability to haul out because of the storms during the winter, if you have storms. And then the pupping season begins starting in March, and it extends into May and June. And during this pupping season, the seals will congregate at certain areas more than others. So they may migrate to different areas, but they'll concentrate at certain areas for breeding, sites where they've been successful in nursing and raising a pup previously. So they're not going to go back to a site where they've lost a pup usually. So they go back to places where they've been successful in weaning pups. The mating happens at the end of the season where they're nursing their pup. So at 30 days, when the pup is 30 days old, the female will come into estrus, she'll mate, and then often leaves. And at that time, the female and pup probably separate and the pup's on his own. I've never, with individuals that were tagged, I've never seen them interacting after that period of time. So mating, they have what's called delayed implantation. You see this with lots of mammals, and it occurs with lots of pinnipeds, usually those in temperate areas, so that they're pupping the same time every year. They have a delayed implantation for a couple months. So this is the delayed implantation period from June into August. And at that point, the fertilized egg implants in the uterine wall and gestation continues. So gestation is about 9 months. They're with a pup for a month. So implantation, delayed implantation is about 2 months. Elephant seals also go through this delayed implantation period. So you'll see it for both species, and you see it with some of the other Otters, but for monk seals, you've heard of a monk seal in Hawaii, they don't have that delayed implantation. They're a temperate species. I mean, they're a tropical species, and so daylight and those factors are not influencing their annual cycle. So the pupping season, the female gives birth to one pup. She has 2 nipples. You can see here's a pup nursing. There's one nipple and the pup's nursing on another. And the female can recognize the pup through sight. It sees the pup. Through sound, the pups, you're going to hear them vocalizing. So they're a key into the female finding the pup. And then smell. So the first hour and days after a pup is born, a female is going to be nosing the pup, just like this picture is captured by Diane Monroe, constantly nosing the pup. So the pup they mutually identify each other. And a female will often nurse a pup on the same area on a beach. She'll keep going back to that. And that's what I followed with individual seals in Drake's Estero. The female would go back to the same sandbar with the pup nursing it. And again, the pups can swim at birth. So this birth sequence is by Jamie Hall, really extraordinary. You can see the amniotic sac, the female is pushing out the pup, and there it is, boom. And usually they come out head first. In elephant seals, it's about 50-50, with harbor seals head first. And that's probably because they've got to get the head to the surface if they're in near water. And they swim within a couple hours of birth. And here you see different sizes of pups. So, and these are newborns with a lanugo fur, and you'll see this with some. It may indicate prematurity, but not necessarily. This lanugo fur is shed usually in the uterus for harbor seals in our latitudes. In Alaska, harbor seals don't shed this lanugo until after birth. Here's a pup without the lanugo, and you can see the spot patterns. And here is a teeny pup, and you can see the umbilicus. So that umbilicus is there for about 3 days before it's shed. So when they're born, they weigh about 24 pounds. And then when they're weaned, they're doubling their weight. So in 30 days, they're up to 50 pounds. And so this is a weanling. You see the difference in size, amazing difference in size between that this little weanling. But in a year, they don't get much bigger than that weanling. That first year is pretty tough. So if I were with you in person, I'd say, well, how many pups do you think are in this picture? And I'll let you have a minute to look at it, and then I'll tell you how many. So, okay, I heard some voices, but 10. So here's one. That one's a little obvious. This one's not so obvious, but see how bright and shiny its fur is? That's a key, because the adults have very dull fur right now. The pups are bright and shiny fur, and that's the mother of this pup. And here, this mother's nursing while she's in the water. This is a weaned pup. It's big and plump, but it's got that silver fur. And then you see these other two, and this one here, and then this little teeny one right here. So again, they can swim at birth, and amazing size difference between this is a very young one, less than a week, versus this weaned one. Look at the size difference. Amazing growth in 30 days. And as I said, they are mating at when they're weaning their pups at 30 days. And the researcher named Sean Hayes was studying their aquatic mating. It takes place in the water. It's not terrestrial. And this explains why males and females, really, there's no size difference between the two. They're really about the same size. And there's a lot of precopulatory nuzzling and smelling. Here's an animal smelling. Are you ready to mate yet? Smelling, so scent is important. And then nipping on the neck and thrashing. You'll see this at the Russian River mouth all the time. And they have these territories, underwater territories called meritories. And what Sean found is male will park himself off of a haul out area where the females are nursing their pups and with their pups, and that size can vary. And he did these sizes in both Drake's Estero and down in Monterey Bay, where he was studying harbor seals, and determined these sizes. Really an ingenious study. He did a lot of interesting work, and I haven't seen much since that on understanding their underwater meritories. Harbor seal vocalizations is pretty hard to follow. It sounds more like bubbles than anything else. If you listen to the audio tapes, there are some roaring sounds that males make underwater, but they have meritories, and like certain species of deer and birds, they have what is called a lek, where the males gather together and they may make sounds, and there is inter-male rivalry, but they'll have a gathering area where they'll express their superiority to their colleagues. But once they hold this meritory, they'll drive out other males that come close to it. And the reason Sean knows about it is he had a hydrophone, he put it in the water, and he did a playback of the male vocalization, and the male holding the territory attacked the hydrophone. So then he had to protect the hydrophone with I think it was a milk carton, one of those big plastic containers to protect it. And then he measured the distance out until it stopped attacking the hydrophone to measure the size of the meritory. So it was a quite ingenious study, but again, incredibly hard to study harbor seals. Most of this takes place in water that is not clear. So after the mating season, the seals are around still, hauling out on their daily schedule and tidal schedule, and then they'll start molting their fur. And this molt takes about 2 to 3 weeks, and they need to haul out more hours per day because the hair follicle grows faster when it's in sunlight and heat. So you'll see here's this kind of molt. They look like they have leprosy, but it's shedding like a dog shedding, and they molt that red color off too. But that red color will come back on individuals that have red previously. They'll be red again. So you'll see this molting over this period of time, and each sex and age class molts at a different time period. So juveniles usually molt early in the season in June, and then males tend to be in July. into late July. And here's an example of a red one molting and shedding like your dog, but they do require hauling out. In contrast to elephant seals, they actually spend most of the time hauled out when they molt, and they have what's called a radical molt. It comes off in big chunks, and they are not at sea. They have to be on shore most of the time when they molt because they don't want to lose that core body temperature. So when you put all this seasonal and annual variation together, you can see that some sites are important for breeding and some are important for foraging. And I was able to tease this out in a study in San Francisco Bay, and I'll just briefly go through this slide for you. These three sites are Richmond San Rafael Bridge. Whoops, I have to go back. Previous. The Richmond San Rafael Bridge is an important haul-out site for harbor seals. This is Yerba Buena Island, where there's a beach where they haul out. And this is Maori Slough, where all those muddied seals were hauled out. And for lines, black is Maori Slough, and it's in a very important breeding area. It's very remote for harbor seals. And this is year and month, and this is count. So for Maori Slough, the pup count is high during the molt count is high, and then it falls in the fall and winter, and then it goes up as a pupping site and a molt, and then down. So you see this up and down for Maori Slough. So it's very important for pupping, very important for molting, low disturbance site. Then in contrast, look at Yerba Buena Island, this green. The animals during the molt are up, but then they come down in the fall, and then they're up during the winter, and they stay up a little bit, dip a little in the pupping season, and then up during the molt, down during the fall, and up during the winter. So this site is very important in the winter, and the reason for that is herring. Herring draw those seals to that site. You have a resident population that is using it year-round, but the numbers increase during the herring season. And then finally, looking at for Richmond San Rafael Bridge, called Castro Rocks, which is the red one, you can see it's pretty even all the way through. So this is an important site year-round, regardless of season. They all dip in the fall because they're spending more time in the water foraging. But usually this site is also pretty high in the winter because the herring are down there. So it gives you an idea, a sense of the differences between sites and that seasonal variation. The other thing I want to point out here is that during the El Nino year of 1998, the pupping season was lower for these seals than for the other months. And so this slide actually captures that 1998 El Nino year. And when they are foraging, they're foraging off of the coast, but within 10 kilometers of a haul out site and within a few miles of land. They don't forage far out to sea. You don't see them off the continental shelf off of here. They're on this orangey area or this flesh-colored area along the coastline in shallower waters. They can dive to 1,000 feet, but usually they dive in waters less than 100 feet. And they occur a lot in estuaries. And they feed mostly at night. And they feed on a whole array of species. They're much more diverse in what they're eating than we know for sure for some of those other species. So for example, California sea lions are chasing herring up the coast. They're chasing anchovies up the coast and hake. That's a big concentration for that species. But for harbor seals, they go after what is ever locally abundant. You don't see them chasing so much different groups of fish prey species or squid. But you can see this array. This is hagfish, which I don't know why anybody would eat hagfish, but they do. Halibut, rockfish, sand dabs, and herring, all sorts of things. But they also like salmon. When salmon is present, they will feed on it, and they will concentrate at mouths of rivers where they can feed on salmon. So this salmon was caught, this picture was caught, I think in San Francisco Bay, of a harbor seal feeding on a salmon. And you look at this, look at their flipper. It's kind of So they're using their flipper also for manipulating their prey once they catch it. Very interesting. There's nothing pink like that. So here is eating a lamprey. This was taken by Jamie Hall and the Russian River. That's a big important part of their diet is lamprey. And a flounder. Here's another one of a flounder. Again, this is the Russian River mouth. So those are important prey for them at the Russian River mouth, and less so steelhead and salmon. And that was based on a couple studies that have been done looking at seal foraging behavior at the Russian River mouth. These other species seem to be as important, if not more. And then this study in Puget Sound, I think, is really good because it shows a seasonal variation of their emphasis on prey. And again, they're resident seals, they're not migratory, they're hanging out there. This is an old study, but I think it represents well that change of season and the emphasis. Clupeids are herring, so herring is really important in the spring, and it's also important, and gattids are also important. Gaddid fish and salmonids are important in the summertime and fall, so those are salmonid runs. Then sand lances, it doesn't matter what season, and anchovies are important in the spring. We see a lot of anchovies in the summer and fall here, so that would be different down here. But again, it's what's locally abundant, but you can see the big drivers are herring for this species regardless of year. We have tracked harbor seal movements, and they have traveled greater than 500 kilometers. But you tend to have resident seals, and then you have these migratory ones, and they're very individual in where they go. So this was the site of tagging, Drake's Estero, and every yellow dot represents where they move to. And you can see it's an incredible range from Monterey Bay all the way up to the Oregon border for that study. We had satellite and radio tags that we tracked seal movements. But different from California sea lions, they're not unidirectional. They're not all going north from the Channel Islands after the breeding season. They're going in many directions. And this little dot off here represents the Farallon Islands. So they actually travel out to the Farallon Islands, which is a brave seal. With satellite tags, we track the movements from Castro Rocks, where we tag them into the various areas of foraging. So what's different about a satellite tag is you get good data on where they're foraging in the water, which is less so with a radio tag. So this seal was foraging in a little bit in San Pablo Bay, really liked Richardson Bay, and it actually hauled out there on a couple places. And then it went out along the coast, and there's foraging around here, went foraging south of the Farallons. This happens to show up a lot in other foraging area for seabirds. So something is attracting them in this corridor here. Some oceanographic feature is concentrating prey where there's foraging down there. And then here this is one individual. This is one individual. So they hauled out in Bolinas Lagoon, and they went up and they hauled out at Double Point, and then they went up to Drake's Estero and hauled out there, and they went around the bend, but not for long, and then they went back. So it gives you an idea that this is not just one haul out site, it's a community. And just like you are going to be hanging out at your house a lot year round, you're going to go someplace maybe for a weekend or maybe for a couple months away and then come back. And that's what this was, a breeding area for the harbor seals that we tagged there. And then they moved out during the fall and winter months to other places to forage. And you can see these haul out sites are very close together. So easy for them to spend a day going from here to there, hang out there for the night or day, and then move on and forage in different areas. Their population in California has been fairly stable in the past couple decades. And it's about 30,000 based on the estimate from NOAA. They haven't had a good count since 2011. That's a long time. It's a decade. And we really don't know what the harbor seal numbers are right now. At Point Reyes, we do, because we survey every year, and so do you in Sonoma County, and it represents about 20% of the state's previous estimate. And this just shows for all the breeding sites at Point Reyes between 2000 and 2018. And of course, COVID interfered with our survey work, but you can see it's fairly stable, a little dip in 2010, and that's associated with an El Nino, and also a dip in 2006, 2016, and those are El Nino years. And if I had 1998, you'd see a dip then. So during El Nino years, they're less likely to pup. So this middle line here is the average. And this is going up and down around the average. And you can see the same with the pups. This middle line is the average, and then they're going up and down around the average and dropping low. Here's low below the average during El Nino years. So El Nino years really does affect what food is available to them. Here's all the sites. This includes Marin and Sonoma and San Francisco Bay and San Mateo. The first off, you can see here's the count, here's the year that Marin County has the highest concentration of seals. But these other counties add up. And I'll say for Sonoma County, there's so many small haul out sites. It's probably much higher than this. This is focusing on the areas where the seals are concentrated. So I think these numbers are not as high as I think they should be. And again, we haven't had the surveys by the state for over a decade. But again, those El Nino years, you see the dips in numbers of seals born. These are the pups, these are the adults. And during the breeding season, excuse me, not the pups, the adults. This is just the adults. And here's a red seal with a pup on Castro Rocks. Incidentally, these surveys are done underneath the Richmond San Rafael Bridge. So you're on ropes going underneath the bridge onto a platform, and then you're counting the seals, which I did for a few years. Part of the changes that occur, not just with the El Nino seasons, is you get habitat changes just with sandbars changing because associated with storms, and they can change in one big storm event, or they can change over a season. If you have a big winter storm year, you're going to lose a lot of that sand along the shoreline. In this, I want to show you how sandbars actually increased in size in Drake's Estero. The seals haul out on both of these sandbars in 2002. And then in 2009, this sandbar, which is this one, got connected to the mainland. And as a result, the seals stopped using that sandbar because predators could start coming onto the sandbar and kill the pups. So that was a change that caused a redistribution of seals at Point Reyes. This sandbar extended and became bigger, so the seals started showing up on this inner part of that where they had they could see long distance if a predator was around, and they started using that little section of beach. So these habitats are not static. They change with seasons and years, and all sorts of things might cause those changes. Okay. And things like sea level rise is going to affect these transitional habitats because they are in that range of 5 inches can make a big difference for transitional habitat. So sandbars and rocky intertidal areas, this is Duxbury Reef, are going to disappear in some cases. Not all cases though. And I want to remember that sand redistributes, bluffs erode and create new sand. So you're going to see changes. It's hard right now to predict how those changes will be expressed in these various habitats. And people are starting to model it right now. In fact, there's a student who's going to be looking at the Russian River mouth and sea level rise and see how that might affect that haul out site. There's a lot of uncertainty in this, not just because of the sea level rise, because of the food webs and because El Nino events have a large effect on food availability and the presence of harmful algal blooms, there is some concern about harbor seals. But I say that with a cautionary note because harbor seals are remarkably resilient in how they use habitats. And the mere fact that they are existing in such high numbers in San Francisco Bay and in California is an expression of that resilience. But they're resilient, but not to disturbances by predators and people. And they do abandon these sites if they're heavily disturbed or chronically disturbed. And when I say disturbance, it's even causing the seals to flush into the water. And a disturbance event can be short-term, and the seals won't rehaul again for 30 minutes. But in that short term, you could have a mother-pup separation, especially if a pup is newly born and that bond hasn't formed. The long-term effects, if you get disturbed day after day or for long periods of time, chronic disturbance, then there's reduced usage of these sites and seals shift to nocturnal hauling out more than diurnal. And then there's reduced reproduction, reduced use by females to give birth. And just think of it, if you were sleeping and your husband was or wife was snoring, I'm the snorer in the family, and I kept you awake, you would want to sleep in a different room. And that's the same case for the seals. They're resting. This is their sleep period when they're on shore. They're resting, and if they're going to get disturbed all the time, they're going to go someplace else. And they're all different sorts of disturbance. There can be people hiking along shore. I'm sure you've seen these ultralights. I've seen them on calm days. We don't have very many calm days, but enough. And then people digging for clams. Kayaking is really taken off and is very popular, or just people walking their dogs on beaches. They really react to dogs barking. But is this disturbance? These are from friends of mine were kayaking in Monterey Bay, and these harbor seals were getting a ride on their kayaks. Is that disturbance? They're having fun. And this harbor seal really likes to be scratched by divers down in Monterey Bay, or they go and pick on them. When they're in the water, they don't feel threatened by people. That's their element. They're designed to be in the water. But when they're on shore, they're feeling more vulnerable. So at Point Reyes, we studied this disturbance, looking at disturbances per hour at multiple sites. And just one example, comparing Tomales Bay with Tomales Point. This is a low disturbance site versus a high disturbance site. You can see the rates of disturbance are almost 1 per hour in Tomales Bay, whereas in Tomales Point, it's really low disturbance rates. And so looking at this, the park is able to alter their management directions to try and protect the seals. So in Tomales Bay, because of that high disturbance rate, they limited access to this one site called Hog Island. Here's Hog Island. If you've been to Tomales Bay, you know the site. It's a big bird breeding site, but it's also a big harbor seal haul-out site. And in the 80s, there were high numbers using it, and then kayaks were discovered, and the seals stopped using it for a long time, and then the park limited access, and now the numbers are starting to go way up. And I think maximum pups now is about 20 that have been seen. Tomales Bay is an interesting site anyway, because the seals go there for herring in the winter months. Their numbers go up mostly in the winter months and not during the pupping season. But this is an example where the park could intervene and protect a site. So that shows the resilience of the seals and their ability to use a site if they're given the space. Now here are terrestrial predators. That's a new emerging issue, and they can't get out to Hog Island, but they can get out to these sandbars, as I mentioned. And this is Bolinas Lagoon, where one was approaching a female that was nursing a pup. Look at how close he got, but he didn't make it. And the female was able to get into the water with her pup before the coyote could prey on it. But they're an important predator that's showing up now. And along with bald eagles, there's new predators that the seals are adapting to. So with seal protection, I gave you the example of Tomales Bay, but you need monitoring, you need research, to understand what's happening before you can make recommendations for taking action. And that's why your role is so important, because you're part of that cycle of monitoring, detecting a problem, then maybe somebody will do research on it and then recommend some actions. But that continued monitoring, even after decades, it's not sexy science, but it's really important science for the long term. And some of these long-term data sets are making the difference for our understanding how climate is affecting these species. So marine protected areas are throughout California now. They're really important. They're in Sonoma County. They've been in place now almost for a decade in some places, and the results are being seen. So the Russian River mouth is one of those marine protected areas identified, not for seals, for salmon, but the seals may benefit from that. And because of the monitoring that's going on marine protected areas, that may give feedback of increasing the size or the type of marine protected area in some of these places in California. So, for example, in the future, maybe this will be an area that's identified for protecting seals, and there'll be a different designation for the mouth of the Russian River. So that concludes my talk, and I have time, at least for a few minutes, for questions. But I just want to thank you so much for your participation in this program, because it is the backbone of the monitoring, it's the backbone of the protection, and we need that more than ever now as we see these changes in pinniped environments, such as coastal colonies. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
So if there are questions, I can answer them now or later. I'll also tell you, you can send me emails through Justin, and I'll answer questions that way too. So Patrick has a question, and go ahead and unmute yourself, Patrick.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much. Question regarding the green seals. Is that algae growing on them considered parasitic?
That's a great question. You could read the article. I'll send it to Justin. It just came out. Actually, just came out about a month ago. And the article goes into great detail about parasitic, and it's not parasitic. They're benefiting from being. It's like a rock to them. They're benefiting from being on that substrate to constantly having habitat and sunlight, because that female is resting at the surface. So it's getting the sunlight it needs to grow and the nutrients from where the seal is. So not parasitic. However, it is affecting the hydrodynamics of that seal by that leafy. I mean, you saw ones that are really leafy colored. Some are just a little, and there have been 4 different species identified that grow on harbor seals. Some are covered head to foot, some just a little bit. But I'll send that article, and Justin can share it with you, and you can understand more and go out to Bodega Marine Lab and look for one.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi, Greg.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for your presentation. Always amazing, and I can always tell the new slides and the new data. So I do appreciate that a lot. So I wanted to ask, similar to what Patrick was asking about the red seals. Now, I think it was you that maybe had mentioned in the past that iron oxide there's a link with agricultural runoff. And
no.
No? Okay.
No, those red seals are red because of iron oxide in the water column. And in San Francisco Bay, there's a lot of iron oxide that's in the water column.
Right.
And it flocculates, so it's accumulating. Minerals will flocculate when you come from fresh water into salt water. And then they attach to things. So they're attaching to the hair follicle. The other is that the seals are sticking their head in the mud as they're getting, and with their flippers for grabbing prey that's in the mud. So benthic, they're eating benthic things like flounders things like that. And that might be another way that they're getting the mud, which is high in the iron. And that's what's happening. So not necessarily nutrient runoff. However, there was one research that showed there was a correlation, but that's not causation. Where seals that had high pollutant loads in San Francisco Bay also were more red or were red. But because it's 40% of San Francisco Bay seals are red, it doesn't necessarily mean it's associated with the pollution. It may be from other factors and where they're feeding or how they're feeding. But this is a study that needs more. It needs to be looked at more intensely because there are plenty of places in the world that are more polluted than San Francisco Bay, and harbor seals exist there and are not red.
So is it safe to say, I mean, that you said the San Francisco Bay. So if I see a red seal in Jenner, that's a visitor? No?
No, because when I satellite tagged and radio tagged harbor seals in Drake's Estero, some of the animals, when I tagged them, they weren't red, they were newly molted. So I didn't know if they were going to be red or not. And two of them came back red when I saw them, and they had gone to Tamales Bay. They had not gone to San Francisco Bay. So genetics may also play a part in it.
Right.
And I don't think of Tamales Bay as being particularly polluted. But those seals, when I had them tagged and I tracked their movements, they had not gone down to San Francisco Bay. So more research is needed. Yeah, it's very interesting. And I hope to encourage students to drill down and look at it. I think a lot of it has to do with where they're foraging. One study that I was looking at talked about ducks also getting red feathers because of the iron getting in the shaft of the feather. And it may be that there's just high iron content in some of the muddy bottoms in San Francisco Bay, and that might be associated with the industrial mining that went on and all of the stuff that was released into San Francisco Bay, which contributed to the siltation. But one student looked at those mining trails in certain areas and could not see a correlation to the tagged animals that we studied. So not a correlation necessarily there.
Is this making them more vulnerable to predators?
No, I don't believe so, but I don't have enough evidence to say yay or nay. But that's a good question. Certainly coloration makes a difference with harbor seals. The harbor seals in San Francisco Bay, the waters are very muddy, especially in San Pablo Bay. If you've ever spent time in that bay, they forage there. You know, they're not using their eyes. Remember, they're using their whiskers for detecting movement and stuff. So they're foraging a lot in San Pablo Bay and in parts of San Francisco Bay that are not clear. So a red seal would not necessarily be visual to a predator in those areas. Good question, though. Really good question. Any? I can also share that paper with you, Justin, on iron oxide.
Yeah. And Patrick got a question in the chat where the iron oxide was coming from. Is it mining?
Yes, hydraulic mining, and that was mining for gold, but other elements too.
Well, terrific presentation, Sarah. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And I just emphasize again how important your contributions, and so great to see new people and people I've known for a long time. Hi, Mary, to see here, and I appreciate it. And Justin, great job. And I love working with you and look forward to it again. So have a good season.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll hand it off to Greg. Greg, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I was talking to my son. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I do. I've actually seen probably at least 6 years of this, and it's great. And by the way, and I will mention it later too, that if you really want to get more in-depth knowledge of about what Sarah just spoke about, she is the co-author of this book, Berkeley Press. I will post the ISBN number in chat, and you can put that in and you buy it from your favorite source, as long as it's not Amazon. You can buy it anywhere you want. Just kidding. Anyway, it's really great to see a whole bunch of seal watchers here, Barbara and Frida, and the most long-lived Mary, who hopefully will share some. It's actually Mary who got me into this racket. And I'm very grateful for that. And Carol's, can't pronounce Sklenica. Carol, is that how you pronounce your last name?
It's Sklenica.
Sklenica, okay. Anyway, it's great to have you guys, and maybe you can help me out in filling in some of the holes of what I have to present. So let's see, a little history. I mean, as it was said, this Seal Watch is the longest lived program. As a matter of fact, from Seal Watch, I think the stewards or the stewards of, no, what was the original? The something of Slavianka. Mary, help me out. Anyway, 30 years at least. So anyway,
Slavianka.
Yeah, but there was something, was it the Friends of Slavianka or the Stewards of Slavianka? There was, anyway, so it's a long-lived program, obviously pretty successful. Was started, or at least spearheaded, by this woman who lived at the mouth of the Russian River, who passed away a couple of years ago, Eleanor Tooley. As a matter of fact, we have a little anecdote that one of our volunteers and myself experienced. We rescued a pup the day after Eleanor died, right in front of her house, and we got the Marine Mammal Center involved, and they rescued the animal and took it down to the Marine Mammal Center, and they called us and asked us what would we like to call the animal, and we said Eleanor, and they said no, it's been used, and Tooley, no, it's been used. And we're like, oh, well, we don't know what to do. And so they say, well, why don't you call her Scrabble? So why? Scrabble, that's a weird name. Well, Eleanor Tooley was notorious amounts in the county to be a mean, fierce Scrabble player. So we rescued Scrabble, and we actually 3 months later went out for the release at Point Reyes. And so that's part of what we do. It's part of the exciting stuff that we can do sometimes at Seal Watch. It's not often, but it's really amazing when you could get to do something of that weight. So what is the purpose of Seal Watch? Seal Watch, the purpose of Seal Watch is primarily to be a docent and to be a steward. So what does a docent mean? A docent means educating the public to what we're doing there, which is helping with conservation, it's helping with education, it's helping with awareness. So that's the docent, and that's our primary purpose, really. The other one is being a steward, primarily meaning being the guardians of the seals. As you heard all through the talk, we are a cause of great disturbance, we humans. And so that's part of our role there. We do that not only verbally, but we also do it through signage. And for those of you who like to get more involved, then you can help me put up signs. It's part of what my task as the point person for Seal Watch. I make signs and put them up, and both at the South Beach and the North Beach. Very importantly, and you have to remember, never put this on your shoulders, you are not enforcement, okay? So you can verbally ask people to participate in the rules of the beach, which is don't disturb the seals. And if by chance someone should be difficult with you, you can just quote what Sarah had mentioned, which is the Marine Mammal Act of 1972. So that is basically the foundation of our authority, so to speak. But we're not authority. If you should need any kind of support, and over the 8 years, I've really never needed support. I did have one drunk guy kind of trying to put me in my place, but the lifeguards eventually came and whisk them away slowly. But, there is, usually you get people at their best down there. They're amazed like we are of the beauty of the place. So you do get people at their best, and you get people from all over the world. But if you should need enforcement, just remember that we will have a radio. We have radios with us that we can then call the Jenner Visitor Center, and then they can take it there, and they'll either call, depending on the disturbance, whether it's lifeguard if it's life-threatening, state parks if it's enforcement, whoever is, sheriff for all that matter. I've seen sheriff down there. So anyway, so importantly, we're docents and stewards. We're not enforcement, okay? So if someone pushes your buttons, just walk away. So what does Seal Watch consist of? Seal Watch consists of 2 shifts a day on weekends, Saturday and Sunday. There is a morning shift, 10 till 2, and then there's a afternoon shift, 2 till 6. I encourage you to try both. The beach is a really dynamic place, and it never looks the same from year to year, and it doesn't look the same from morning to evening. So there are different animals, there's different biology going on depending on what time of the day. Sunsets are gorgeous. So those 2 shifts. In that said, those of you who choose to sign up, and I mentioned the old timers because for those of you who sign up, pick a experienced volunteer to do your first, maybe second shift, just so you get a handle of where things are, how to do them. And again, the ones that Mary is the longest serving volunteer for stewards. Mary, you've done like 25 years, I think you told me once. Something, I mean, it's amazing. And then, we have Frida Weiss, who's probably your 5th year, Frida. So we have Barbara Geegan, who has done it for years. And then Carol is probably 2 or 3 years, maybe 3 or 4 years already. So pick one of us. And Patrick, I see you've come back. And so Patrick, I know has experience doing it. So you could also team up with Patrick. So just for your sake, it's just easier, not that it's complicated, but we have a box that I will talk about. We have equipment that we use, and by doing it with someone that has done it before, it'll be easier for you. So speaking of that equipment box, so part of the shift is to, you arrive at the beach, usually, a little bit earlier. Say if your shift is at 10, get there maybe 9:45. It does take about 8 minutes to get from the parking lot to the jetty where we usually set up. So at the entrance of the parking lot, and that is the Goat Rock parking lot, or the jetty side parking lot, because that beach has 2. There's Goat Rock that separates 2 beaches. There's one parking lot over by Goat Rock itself, and then there's the further north parking lot, which is I call it the jetty parking lot. But just as you're entering that parking lot, there is a service road on the right. And if you actually look, you'll see that there is a gray, cream-colored box with a lock on it. That's our box. In that box, we have all the equipment that you should need to do a shift. The type of equipment you'll find there is a vest, which is important to wear because it differentiates you, and it gives you the appearance of some authority, and at the very end that you are a docent. Besides that, we have binoculars, we have tripods, we have flyers, we have photo journals, and we have a logbook. The logbook is for us to keep light records of what we're doing there. The most important one to state parks, and this is important, is that we document the visitors that we engage. Our value down there is proportional to how much we educate. So if there's any data that you should collect, we used to collect a fair amount of data, but that has been shared now with the Pinniped program, that they're doing more hard science in collaboration with the water agency in order to monitor how to treat that river. It's a very managed river. And so in order to make those decisions, There needs to be some data on biology and some data then, of course, on hydrology of what's going on at the river. So we don't do that data anymore. What we do add is participation, visitor participation. So we keep lots of that. And, you know, I wanted to bring in one of our volunteers here, which we're going to talk about participation is, I've done a number of shifts with Frida Weiss, and I've always been very impressed how she engages and talks to people. So let her take it away.
Hi. Yeah, so as was mentioned before, the visitors come from all over. They're, you know, they can come internationally, different cities, of course, locally. And when they come to after they've parked, there are signs at the beginning of the walkway. They may or may not read them or see them. And then there's signs roped off that Greg puts up, protecting where the seals are. And so you want to try to approach the visitors as they come, usually towards the jetty. We usually try to set up on the jetty, which can change week to week, depending on the weather and the river. And so try to approach the visitors, try to engage them, you know, encourage them to ask questions. They're usually really interested in the seals. And you want to, a lot of times they'll ask about rules too. You know, they can't have dogs on the beach. I've had visitors that have come up and asked about fishing, and there's no fishing allowed, no collecting driftwood. And I've had some visitors that have been problematic, who've been a little reticent to stay away, and some people just start walking around the signs, and you have to try to encourage them to stay back. But mostly the visitors are really, really interested in the seals and want to be educated and learn all about them. And that's the most enriching part of the job. It's not the job, but the volunteering is engaging with the people and educating them. And then there are some, I'll just give an example. Sometimes, like there was somebody on the beach that was blowing these bubbles, these huge, one of those bubble makers. And so these large bubbles were going up into the air. And the seals ended up flushing. They got so freaked out because the bubbles ended up floating over them. So we had to call the visitor center, and the ranger was contacted, and the ranger ended up dealing with that person. So occasionally rangers will get involved, and either we'll contact them or they'll be doing their rounds, driving through. But yeah, and the visitors are wonderful. So you'll really enjoy engaging them. Anything else? Okay, back to you, Greg.
Yeah, so one of the things I noticed that Frida would always do was offer the visitor a binocular. So if they're looking, we have a whole bunch of binoculars. Generally, we have at least 3 binoculars, monocle for kids, and a large spotting scope. And the spotting scope is usually placed on a tripod. So that's a good way how to engage them, because generally we've been fairly lucky over the last few years, where the way that the river has broken has set up a viewing scenario of almost amphitheater to show, where we are above the seals looking down on them at the mouth of the river, and the river isn't so wide that they're far away. That's ideal, but that doesn't consistently happen. If for some reason, for instance, we get a very wetter latter half of this winter, the river may open further north like it has in the past. And then it's a huge challenge for visitors to enjoy the seals. And it's a real challenge for us, because we have to maintain them, maintain the visitors away from them through the North Beach, which, trust me, is problematic. Anyway,
So,
Can I have a question?
sure.
Are we, I didn't mention the binoculars because of COVID, we weren't using them. So are we going to be reinstituting that? And then also, kayakers are a good thing to talk about too. Sorry.
No, I think that's a great question. I think we'll have to defer to stewards, to Justin and the stewards, to see what policy, what protocols we're going to follow this year. I mean, even within COVID, we had discussed sanitation as a sort of a remedy to be able to keep the binoculars, which are such an important part, by using, rubbing alcohol or wipes. But we opted against it because, I mean, we were all pretty scared of COVID, and we all should be. But anyway,
Yeah.
So yeah, Justin, we'll defer to you on that.
Yeah, and I think the fear back then when that decision was made, we've learned a lot about COVID and transmission of surfaces.
Right.
So I think that with a sanitizing regimen, I don't see us having any issues. We just have to make sure that you have all the supplies that you need to keep them sanitized, and instructions on how to clean them after each use.
Okay, yeah, because that's definitely one of the high points. All right, so yeah, so engaging the visitor through the binoculars, also with just a friendly "how are you?" If they come close to you, I certainly don't run up to a visitor and get in their face and say "how are you?" But certainly if they're nearby and they know you're a visitor because you're a docent because you're wearing a vest. Absolutely, greet them. We're representing the stewards, we're representing state parks, and we're representing the conservation effort that we're trying to do at the beach. So speaking of the beach, and this is, this is important for you and for visitors, and since we are docents, remember at the beach, Goat Rock is considered one of the most lethal beaches in Northern California. It has taken a lot of lives. And so I've always made it a point, especially with people who you can tell don't come to the beach often, to approach them gently and tell them this very simple thing. If the sand is wet, you shouldn't be there. Meaning that, and I explain it as being that a wave has hit there and you don't know the size of that wave. And it's the intermittent size of waves that is what makes that beach very dangerous. It's the wave that washes you out. Once you're washed out into that water, unless you know what you're doing, you're pretty much guaranteed to be toast. So I also tell people, do not turn your back to the ocean. Keep your eyes on the ocean. If you have children, absolutely. If the sand is wet, don't be there. Oftentimes I've gotten the question is, well, where can I swim? I point them to the river. The river is a wonderful place to swim. It's shallow, it's warm, it's non-threatening. So they have plenty of places to swim. It may not be the ocean, but trust me, you can tell them, trust me, you don't want to go in that ocean. Plus it's 54 degrees. Anyway, so always be mindful of people, close to the ocean, because it's not your job to save them. And if something ever happened, it's, that is their fate. Obviously you have the tool, which is this radio that we have in our equipment, to call the visitor center and request for help, but do not ever follow anybody in there.
And in addition to, people love to walk down to the end of the jetty,
right, and
do selfies. And oftentimes the waves can come up really high and they can be taken. So warnings are important.
Right.
And then, do you want to talk about the kayaks or?
Well, we'll talk about the disturbances shortly.
Okay, good.
Yeah, because I mean, so but to second what Frida just said, we do not, again, we're not enforcement. The state parks lifeguards would prefer if people were not on that jetty. For one, is for what Frida said, I've taken showers on that pier of waves breaking all of a sudden,
And, they are 20-foot waves, when they splash, and, it's basically like a barrel of water falls on you. If it happens, it's fine. But the problem is that if the wave comes in a certain way, it has a thrust, it can push you off. Not to mention that that end of the pier is full of algae and sea lettuce, just like our seals. And it's really slippery. So just be careful. I mean, it's an amazing place to walk out there. But if the ocean is rough, feel free to tell the visitor state parks would prefer if you did not walk on that jetty and do so at your own peril. So, all right. So, we have those 2 shifts. We have an equipment box. And as I just mentioned, the equipment box also has a radio. And we encourage you to practice with the radio. And at the very basic, what we like to do is like an hour into when you're there, check in with the visitor center. So you pick up the radio, and another reason why to do a shift with an experienced volunteer, just to learn how to do the radio. I mean, a radio is a radio, but it has a button on the side. You press it, he'll say hello, let go, the other person answers. That's simple. There is a power button in the front, the universal power button, which is a little circle with a stick on in the middle. But anyway, I encourage you to do a shift with us. We do have a manual, and Justin, maybe you can tell us more about that in a little bit, but there is a manual for Seal Watch. It's a PDF, and I know that Mary and I put that together and edited, and we used to have a radio page, and it hasn't changed much. But again, I really do encourage you to do something to sign up for your first shift with us, with our experienced volunteer. The radio, so that's part of the equipment. So once you have your equipment, you've gotten the box, you close it down. By the way, there is a combination on the lock for the box, and it is 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, you have my number if ever, but I think, again, I encourage you to do a shift with experienced volunteers. 1, 2, 3, 4. I went down there the other 2 weekends ago, and I managed to open it after the winter, after all the storms. So I will go and spray it. It's if there is a trick to it, sometimes is you have to yank at it. It's if you just pull at it gently, no, you yank at it. But I'm gonna go and spray some oil and stuff on there this weekend, just to get it loose and get it nice. Anyway, so let's see. So typically, what do? So we get our backpack, we put on our vests, and we start heading down towards the jetty, depending on where the seals are. Most of the time, especially in the latter part of the season, the seals are on the North Beach, but sometimes early on in the season, they may be on the South Beach, that is on the side of the beach where all the tourists and all the visitors come. So that's where our roping comes in. But by that time, you as a volunteer won't have to worry about that. Hopefully by that time, I've set up the ropes. I tend to wait a little bit into the season for putting up the ropes because of the storms, the winter storms. Last year, I had to put up the signs 3 times because 2 of the times the ocean decided to take them away. So I'm going to wait a little bit longer. Anyway, so you position yourself where you think is the best viewing experience for a visitor, because you're going to have this binoculars and this scope and all that. And you put out your literature if you want, which are usually what we have are close-up photos or photo documentaries of the seals. And we have them popping, we have them molting, we have all sorts of documents, visual documents of what they do. We also have brochures about dogs on the beach. We have brochures about the seals, about the stewards. Anyway, there's brochures there. So you set up, and basically you're just going to enjoy the beach for 4 hours. It's an amazing place. You get to meet some amazing people, and you document what you do in a very light way. let's see. One thing that has been and is a point of contention, and Frida alluded to it, there are several. The main problems you're going to encounter in terms of disturbance are kayakers, because they have a different vantage point, I suppose. If you're in a kayak and you're looking at the seals from the water, you can't really measure distance or gauge distance very well. So they tend to get a lot closer than they should. The marine mammal states 100 feet, 150 feet, 50 yards. And so from the water, and like Sarah said, seals are really skittish. They really are. They get spooked very easily. So kayakers, I don't think they do it deliberately. I think they're just their vantage point is different. Anyway, they cause the most disturbances. We have a whistle in the bag. We can whistle at them. We can wave our arms. We have a banner that we can put up. Essentially, the point is to get their attention and inform them. You can point your arms towards the seals, and then you can make waving away gestures, because they will, invariably every summer or every season, there's got to be, I experience at least 5 flushes as a result of kayakers. So to minimize that is ideal. The other big problem are dogs. And not that the dogs themselves are aggressive or create a problem, but one, it's the rules on Goat Rock. There are no dogs. There is some biology, I think, biological reasons, and I think that we saw a picture of coyotes and stuff like that. They're historical predators, and I think that they're tuned into on levels that we may not be tuned into. Anyway, so it's a delicate subject. It's difficult to deal with sometimes, because you get the emotional dog argument that this is my emotional companion, and that's fine. And personally, I try to follow the biological reasoning and tell them that the animals are hardwired to fear dogs. And because at that beach, we have the virtue of having an option, because the best thing to conflict is giving an option. And the option is to go to Blind Beach. Blind Beach is the beach that is on the other side of Goat Rock. That is a dog friendly. I think I don't know if it might be dog leash friendly too, that you can let your dog run. I'm not sure about that.
No.
But no?
Nope.
Okay.
Dog for leash.
Okay, but that beach, that's for dogs. The other beach is for the seals and for visitors and for summer activities. So you have all the right to say, if someone should give you a hard time and you feel justified in it, by all means, pick up your radio, call the General Visitor Center and request help from the lifeguards. They're our allies. Always make sure that you say hi to the lifeguards, because not only are they a sweet bunch, but they are your allies. And if you get good enough friends like I did, they'll give you a ride back from the jetty to the parking lot on their cool truck. You don't have to carry all the equipment. Anyway, that's just me. But anyway, they're your allies. Make friends with them. Those of you who are going to request for help. Let's see.
Do you want something else on kayaks?
Yeah, please. Yeah, I see you. I saw you the other day working at the kayak stand.
Yeah, so as much as I underneath my breath was like screaming at kayakers for years, now I'm working with Suki Waters with Ecotrek. She does the kayak rental right by the visitor center. She does a 15-minute safety natural history talk before the kayaks go out. So probably, I would say 95, at least high percentage of the guys running for Suki are not the problem. Then she goes out also to the overlook. You may have seen her when I didn't know who she was, and I was doing seal watch. I'm like, oh, that's crazy lady at the overlook with the whistles. Like, who is that? So that Suki will go to the overlook to make sure her kayaks are responding. If somebody's too close to the seals, she's up there at the overlook with her little whistle, telling people to go away from the kayak. So now I know who that is. Just the other thing, she's also willing, if you want some help putting signs on the North Beach. You kind of did that on your own last years. You put some red flags and driftwood. You tried to put little arrows here or go farther up the North Beach, more by, you know, the Haystack Rock if you want to land the kayaks.
Yeah, I normally put signs there, but they're mostly tailored to people who come down from the trails, from the road. But those who kayak into that lagoon there, yeah, they can be a problem.
Yeah, there were some just last weekend who were right at the mouth, and then we both tried to tell them to leave, but basically they ignored us.
Yeah, no, I think I mentioned it to Justin that it would be good because it's the privateers, people using the landing to get their kayaks, which is fine. But I think that that's the point of education right there. I mean, I know Suki does a great job, but I think that addressing the landing where people come in with their private boats, that's gonna. So anyway, that's just a heads up. Kayakers can be a problem, you know. Out of 100, you know, 20 may be a problem, and out of those, 5 may cause a flush. So the other one is dogs, and you have recourse there. Send them to Blind Beach, and if they're difficult and you feel justified that their difficulty is not justified, please call the visitor center.
Yeah, just add one more thing on when you're setting up, where people can sneak by you, which they're not intentionally doing, but you're like, how did they get so close? Is you can't put the signs right at the river, and you can't put the signs right at the ocean because they'll wash away. So that's, especially when you're doing it by yourself, you're kind of looking who's coming oceanside and who's coming riverside, who can get around to get to the seals. People coming up the middle see the yellow ropes, so they'll stop.
No, and that's true, because on a busy day, you know, on a normal day, it's fine. But on a busy day, like one of these 4th of Julys or something like that, where you may have as many as 50 people around you, it gets hairy. I mean, and I don't mean difficult. It's just, you know, you've got a lot of things to mind. And you get caught up in engaging some of the visitors, and you've got, yeah, those ones who are sneaking behind the ropes, trying to get a selfie with the seals. It happens, and we're not going to do a perfect job, but I think if we,
yeah, a lot of times they're not sneaky, they just don't see them. A lot of times you point them out and they go, oh, that's not driftwood. It's like, no, that's the seals.
Oh, well, yeah, well, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, so many people have to be told those are seals. It's like, no, and they give them the binoculars, and no, it's not driftwood. It's
well, then they're very excited once they realize
totally
those aren't wood, they're seals. They're really excited.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I remember when I first moved out here, I did the driftwood thing. Oh yeah, look at that driftwood. No, they're seals. Anyway, let's see. Well, you volunteers who've done this, what did I forget? What should I, Mary? What did I not cover? Unmute yourself. Oh, I'm still muted. Still muted.
Maybe part of the documentation, if you see, sometimes you see whales, you know, any kind of interesting occurrence with the seals, that can be documented in the logbook too.
That's a good point, especially like this, the whales. Like when you see a whale, it likely portends a pattern that the whale is going to be there for a few days, maybe a week or so. So that's a good way how to tell the next docent that there's whales on the beach. And that's a point of attraction for a lot of visitors. When you do see whales down there, it really is epic because they are so close to the beach that, you know, unless you're on a boat, you're never going to see a whale that close. I mean, there's a lagoon there right by the estuary, and they just come so close. I mean, I actually one summer, yeah, I saw a humpback there, and you know, to see a pelagic animal to be that close was just spectacular. But by recording it in the logbook, we give the next shift, we give them a heads up of what's going on. The same with like dolphins, anything that's unusual. Note it down there. one of the other things that we do note, and I think it's important probably for state parks, is the disturbances in the logbook. Most important is who we engage and how many people we engage. But very important too is to record the disturbances so that we know what we're up against, so that we will find out if we want to make a case for improving our kayak discussion or putting something in the landing. I think that the logbook should reflect the disturbances caused by a kayak. Let's see. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I think, Justin, you can help me out here, is the calendar. So the calendar has been an evolving vehicle over the last few years, and especially with COVID, we kind of lost a little bit of it. The calendar used to be handled by hand, where we, and now we're doing Zoom, so we can't do it by hand, but where you would email me or someone's asking, I'll go through the questions in a second. How we sign up is we had a analog calendar. Everybody put in their names. That went away. We moved to a Google Calendar. Now we're moving to another then we moved to the state's parks system, which is called Bidder Impact. But that was a little bit hard for a lot of people to maneuver through. You have to become, you got to enroll, and the interface isn't the most clean. And I don't know. I was fine with it. I'm a computer guy, but still, I didn't think it wasn't a very good user experience. Now we're going to work on something with Team Up, a program called Team Up, which I think you will still have to go through me, but it will be visible, because part of the problem is visibility. It's nice to be able to see the calendar and see who's after you, so that when you go and do a shift, it's 2 o'clock, no one has shown up, and you don't know if someone's going to be showing up, and you walk away with the equipment and you're halfway down the beach, and then another shift walks, you meet up with the next shift, and all of a sudden all the equipment. Anyway, so we're trying to solve that problem so that there's visibility in that calendar. I think for now, until, and maybe Justin can fill in the gaps, and we're given a presentation of how Team Up works. Look at all the weekends that you look at the weekends that we have. We have from the beginning of March through the end of August. All the weekends in between and the main holidays are available to do shifts. We have two shifts, a morning shift, 10 till 2, and we have an afternoon shift, 2 to 6. So look at your calendars. I encourage you to at least do 1 shift a month. Remember that you have the incentive that if you do 24 hours in a season, you get a Mendocino and Sonoma County free state parks pass, which means that you can go to many of the wonderful state parks that we have here. I use mine a lot. I love going down to Bodega Dunes and going up a little bit north and Salt Point, and I can use it there. So I encourage you, and that's only going to require 1 shift a month to get your 24 hours.
Is there a way when you redo the calendar that we could sign up for one that day? So especially working with Suki and the kayaks, if it's a beautiful day, we're renting kayaks. But then the good old afternoon shift, the wind comes up and we're like, okay, get the kayaks out the water. Not good for kayaks to be out there. So sometimes when it closes up, I've gone to the overlook, and if the afternoon shift just isn't there because nobody was assigned or they're getting blown off the beach.
Right.
It's like, okay, I'll go down there and do like a 4 to 6, which I did sometimes, but there's no way to put it on the calendar.
That's a great point. I mean, there is a way to do that. Oh, there's the calendar for us. There is, in order to record those hours, Barbara, you can at the end. When you submit your report through Better Impact for state parks, you submit that as one of your dates. But Justin's about to show us how Team Up works, and if there are, if that's going to answer your question, maybe. So take it away, Justin.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, and this is a new tool. We're going to use it for all of our volunteer programs that we're able to schedule online, and so that we can have people sign up independently. But just know that you're the point person for the program as well as steward staff using the email stewards@stewardcr.org. Will both have access to this, and the way that it works, you'll see we have Jenner and Armstrong visitor centers. We've been using it for Jenner. Linda was she's out of the country traveling, and so you'll see that there's the 2 shifts. Greg will share a link with everybody that gives you access to this calendar, and all you have to do is click on a link, and then you click sign up. So this one, sorry, the maximum number of signups has already been reached for this event. We'll probably add more capacity for Seal Watch so that we can have multiple people out there if needed, but it's really as simple as opening the link, clicking on the shift, and going to sign up. The only thing that this capability doesn't have is you can't really remove yourself from it. So if you're signed up, you have to have, and you can't make it, you have to have an administrator remove you. And that's the view that I have here with this right now. Any general questions? Clearly we'll get this calendar populated with Seal Watch dates.
Justin, I just noticed that a couple of the shifts showed 3 hours. So do people sign up for modified rather than the standard 2 4-hour shifts?
I think it's because these are for our visitor center volunteers. This is just a sample.
Got it.
Sample
Okay,
calendar.
thanks. Yep.
And I also just want to highlight, I think when you guys will see it, you'll just see the one Seal Watch calendar, but you can click on other calendars to make them go away in case you're seeing those ones as well. Or if you also volunteer for a visitor center, you can see everything in one place. So.
And Justin, the light poking around I did on this program, we will be able to export a Google Calendar that we can then publish on the Seal Watch page of the stewards.
I think we can. I'm not 100% sure on that one yet. We can look into either having a link to this on the Seal Watch page or seeing if there's a way to embed this calendar in there, so it's sort of like a read-only thing. But it's really the way that people are going to use it is through the link. And while I have the screen, wanted to share with new and returning folks where things are on the website. So if you go to the stewards homepage and go to volunteer resources, that's where you're going to find things like that handbook that I put in the chat, the Seal Watch handbook. There's a lot of new forms for volunteers to fill out. So some people that have volunteered for years and years and years, there's some new forms to fill out. For new folks that want to get involved, we have on this volunteer opportunities page a new onboarding packet that has all the forms in one place that you can fill out online. I'd recommend downloading it first, but once you get started, and I don't know if it'll do it. Yep, you fill your name in one spot and it starts to populate in the rest of the form. So these are all this California State Parks Volunteer and Parks Programs forms that people need to fill out so that they're adequately covered by workers' comp from the state, and so that we have all the information that we need for issuing those district passes. And so you'll be in good standing as a volunteer. And one of those things is vaccination status. So we need to get that on record for folks. We're sort of going through program by program to get paperwork up to date. So just we're being patient, hang in with us if we reach out about it. We look forward to working with you on it. And that's it from me.
Justin, can we have that schedule again? Does it list the actual volunteers signed up for the shift? I know you had all the spots filled in for, say, whale watch. Does it actually does it show the viewer if someone is signed up versus not signed up?
It does.
Okay.
It shows how many slots are available, and then it shows the name of folks that are signed up.
Oh, okay, because I saw it was showing all the slots, but it's better if we know if that slot that's being shown has someone in it or not.
It'll show that to everybody.
Okay. Because that way we know if you do a morning shift, you know that there's an afternoon shift coming and you don't leave the beach until they arrive. And that's historically a little bit of a problem. Carol had asked a question about what's a flush. We have two types of disturbances with seals that we've categorized them in two. One is a head alert, and that's, they're resting and then their heads go up. And that's usually that if they've perceived a disturbance on their way, they feel slightly in danger. That's usually what I tell people, actually the visitors, if you see a head alert, you're too close. And then the other one is a flush. A flush is when the majority of the herd flush into the water. And that's the one that can cause problems with abandoning pups and creating longer term problems. So again, the head alert is when their heads go up, and if the danger persists, it's going to end up in a flush. Typically, things like drones do cause flushes. Those bubbles that Frida was talking about cause flushes. Someone in the North Beach causes a flush. A kayak too close causes a flush. So that's the one we want to avoid. Head alerts are fairly common, but it's also a good way for you as the docent, as a steward, to see that something's causing a disturbance. So if you see their heads go up, stop what you're doing, look around and see if you can identify what's causing the problem. And as I said, it's a kayaker, someone on the North Beach. Unfortunately, sometimes dogs on the North Beach, people go to that North Beach because it's not secured as well as the South Beach. People run their dogs on there. So I think, do you guys have any questions for Justin about the calendar? Because the calendar is the sticking point in the past. We want to make it work. We want to give you the flexibility to sign up on your own time. And we all want the benefit of seeing who's signed up for what. Because what I will do, for instance, I will sign up for a bunch of shifts. And then you new volunteers, as I've encouraged you, I encourage you to pair up with someone who's done this, an experienced volunteer. So you're not going to know that unless you can read who's there. I'm available through email, so feel free to send me an email. You can text me too or call me. I tend to, if I don't recognize the number, I let it go to voicemail. But emails, I respond, and text I respond. While we get acclimated and we all get on this calendar, I will look at the calendar this weekend and work with Justin if I have any questions and issue that link for all of you, and you can all start signing up. One thing about shifts, I want to make sure that you remember, dress in layers. Early season can be brutal. Sometimes it can be gorgeous, like today is probably absolutely spectacular there. But I've had snow squalls down there in March, and then you've got incredible heat, that can be pretty hot during the summer. So anyway, dress in layers. Yeah, Carol.
Yeah, I was just looking at the handbook and it needs an update. It still has Eleanor Toohey's number to call for weather.
Yeah, well, she might answer. What if she answers?
But I actually live out here, so if you want to put me in there, you could.
Oh, that's right. You're very close. All right, Justin, do you have the master of that PDF?
I do, yeah.
All right. Well, did you hear that we should remove Eleanor, who is?
I did.
And also the round court. Well, there's quite a bit here to update. I'll just say that.
All right.
I have a
It
question.
also has a fabulous introduction to the program by Dion Hardy, who
Yeah.
founded it, and
Yeah.
it's very inspiring to read what she wrote at the beginning of this handbook, which is still great. And also, I'm new and I've never used the scopes or anything because
right,
it's been COVID ever since I started.
All
It would
right.
be great if we had some kind of training for that stuff.
Well, you're close by, so yeah, you can come down when either Frida or Mary or I are down there. I mean, also Barbara left, but yeah, Barbara's, oh no, there she is.
Yeah,
You know,
good
we
idea.
all set up the scope in wind or no wind. Okay.
And usually you say that if it's really cold and windy, it's okay to leave. I think people like to hear that because
Yeah, thank you
it's
for
pretty
bringing it up, you
miserable.
know.
And if there's no one there,
Yeah, you're not supposed to be a martyr. I mean, if it's cold, leave. If it's really windy, and sometimes it can get so windy there where the sand is blowing sideways, don't stay. And if the ocean is really rough, don't stay. Oftentimes, if the ocean is beyond really tough, state parks will close that beach. But yeah, if you feel threatened or not comfortable being on that beach with that ocean being the way it is, by all means, don't. So any other questions? Yeah, Claire.
I don't know if I missed it, but is there a way of us being able to contact the person we're volunteering with?
Sure. Let's see. Well, initially you're going to be wanting to volunteer with an experienced experienced volunteer, correct?
Right, but what, I'm just thinking, if you've signed up and what if at the last minute there's an emergency or something and you can't attend your shift, how do you contact the person who you're volunteering with?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think that's.
We just had a phone list before.
Yeah, we have a list. I don't know how updated it is. Justin, I sent you mine. Do you have something more current than I do?
I wouldn't. No, unfortunately. I'm not.
We could just email it to you, Greg, if people
Yeah.
are willing. Our
Oh yeah,
phone numbers.
if you're willing to, I mean, you can always email me. And if you all want to email me with your vitals, say a phone number and email, obviously I'll know the email, and I'll start a new. I do have a mailing list, but as I alluded to, it's probably fairly outdated. But Claire, you speak to a luxury that we used to have when we used to have 2 people per shift when we had lots of volunteers, and that's just something that's no longer the case. So your initial ones will definitely be with experienced volunteers, but once you're trained, by all means, go out there on your own and enjoy it. Unless you want to pair up with someone yourself. I mean, I'll do shifts with people that I know, but yeah, I think if you contact me, I will do my best to contact anybody that that it's causing a scheduling problem with.
Yeah. Okay.
And definitely take your when you're on the ship, take your cell phone out there. You don't get that much access, but sometimes it will say, depending on how you walk around in your carrier, that you can make an emergency call. And you still have the radio, and hopefully you can see the lifeguard, but sometimes you don't. So sometimes actually an emergency call will go through in the signal you have, which I've never had to use, but.
Okay, thanks.
One more thing about phones. There's actually very good Verizon service now. When you come right out of the parking lot, down the sandy incline, and where those big logs are, there are 2 bars of Verizon now, which is
good to know.
Really helpful if you have Verizon.
And don't even think about getting signal if you have AT&T, so may as well leave your phone at home.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so. Yeah, I just posted my number, and so did Justin, in the chat. So if you just copy that, and I don't know if my email, all my contacts on the Seal Watch page of the stewards, and my phone number and my email, so you can reach me that way. But any other questions? I hope you guys do sign up. I really, it's been the highlight of my last 8 years. I really, it's just one of those things I really love doing. It's a good way to get out of Dodge. You're out in one of the most beautiful places in the northern coast. I'm always reminded by visitors, he's like, you guys live in a beautiful place. And so, yep, we sure do. So be great to see you and join us. Let's see, Carol, see for the weather, text. Yeah, okay. So Carol just put her number. There are a number of cams along the coast. I mean, I use the one in Bodega, which will tell you pretty much what's going on at the coast. So a lot of really thorough weather sense. But anyway.
Oh yeah, I think I'll give you up when I do my contacts. I'll give you Water Trek's number 2, because usually on the weekend, if I'm not doing Seal Watch, I'm there at the rental booth. So
right,
you can call me too.
Yeah,
that could be another weather contact.
You can tell us if the wind is blowing crazy. Any other questions? All right. Well, I thank you all for to joining us. I hope you enjoyed Sarah. I find her amazing, and she's just a well of knowledge. And I posted the book at the ISBN for her book. If you want anything about Northern California marine mammals, seriously good tome. So yeah, hopefully we'll see you on the beach.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you again, everyone, for joining us today on a Saturday. And yeah, hope to see you out on the beach. And thanks for your interest in this important volunteer program.
Thank you.